Recording in progress.
I now call the General Committee meeting to order for May 29th. This meeting is being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent items, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of General Committee may ask that an item be held to discuss it further. If an item isn't held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at General Committee, and the recommended motion will go forward to City Council for next week for consideration. We're going to start with deferred business. 24G114, deferred by General Committee on May 8th, 2024. Memorandum for circulation list dated February 21st, 2024, concerning the key performance indicators for Council's 2022 to 26 strategic plan. That's approved. DEF2, Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, the staff report CCS 002-24 concerning the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Committee be deferred until the General Committee meeting scheduled on May 29th, 2024. May I get somebody to hold that, please?
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Kungl. Reports of the advisory or special committees. There's 3 reports from reference. The report of the Community Safety Committee is the first one from May 8th, 2024. Councillor Morales, may you give us an update for this evening?
Yes, I can, Mayor Nuttall. So at the meeting, we talked about the couple localized investigation for no stopping zone in Ward 8, St. John Vianney, bike lane in the Grove Street area in Ward 1, raised intersection at Madeline Drive and Country Lane in Ward 9, as well as an investigation for a 3-way stop at Ann Street North and Hammer Street West, which I believe it should be Ward 4, maybe Ward 5. No, we're going to go with Ward 4, final answer. Okay, I'm getting yes. And finally, we completed the conversation with discussion about the lease of additional speed enforcement cameras, which took up the chunk of the time of the meeting, and questions were asked and answered of councillors and by staff. And the meeting adjourned at 6:08 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. I'll now go through the motions from the Community Safety Committee, CSC1, investigation no stopping zone, St. John Vianney Catholic School. It's approved on consent. Bike lane, Grove Street, that staff investigate development services and investigate the restriction of parking on Grove east from Johnson to Penetang. Approved. CSC3, raised intersection Madeline and Country. Approved. CSC4, investigation for the 3-way stop and Hanmer. Approved. CSC5, lease of additional speed enforcement cameras.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Harvey. Um, 5.2, the report of the Affordability Committee from May 8th. Councillor Nixon, could you please provide us with a quick update?
Yes, I can, and thank you, Mayor Nuttall. The Affordability Committee met Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. Present were all members of the Affordability Committee as well as all members of Council. And in addition, we had, I believe, about 13 members of staff in attendance. We dealt with a number of different issues. First was an application for zoning bylaw amendment and red line revision to draft plan of subdivision 750 Lockhart Road. Alyssa Woods of KLM Planning gave a presentation on behalf of Ballymore Building Barrie Corporation for the lands known municipally as 750 Lockhart Road. And then Andrew Gamiro, Senior Planner, provided an update concerning the status of the application. He advised the staff are currently reviewing the primary planning and land use matters. And Mr. Gamiro also discussed the anticipated timelines for the staff report regarding the proposed application. No questions were asked and no verbal comments were provided by members of the public. We then dealt with the proposed Community Improvement Plan, CIP, in accordance with the City of Barrie's official plan. Michelle Banfield, Executive Director of Development Services, and Shelby White, Senior Planner with the City of Barrie, provided a presentation, and no questions were asked of Ms. Banfield or Ms. White. We had some verbal comments by Corey Chisholm, partner of MHBC Planning, and Greg Jones, president of SkyDev, provided a presentation discussing their development, future development at the old YMCA site. No questions were asked of Mr. Chisholm or Mr. Jones. The report of the Heritage Barrie Committee was presented or will be presented at the May 29th, 24th Affordability Committee, which we just had, which was received. We discussed the 2024 Doors Open Barrie, that staff and Access Barrie and Economic and Creative Development in partnership with Tourism Barrie assist Heritage Barrie with marketing for the Doors Open Barrie 2024 event. And we adjourned at 6:58 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. We have one motion from AF1 2024 Doors Open Barrie. That's approved on consent. We're now going to move to 5.3, which is Infrastructure and Community Investment Committee. Councillor Hamilton, could you please provide a summary for us?
Sure, and thank you, and through you, Mayor Nuttall. The Infrastructure and Community Investment Committee met on Wednesday, May 15th at 6 p.m. All members of the committee were present, including 2 additional members from council. The focus of the meeting centered on a presentation delivered by Tom Reeve, the Senior Project Manager of Water and Wastewater, concerning laying the foundation for tomorrow's infrastructure, 2051 infrastructure master plans. The presentation provided an overview of the city's core infrastructure, which includes water, wastewater, transportation, and drainage. It went over the forecasted growth projections for the city and also the forecasted service growth needed to provide municipal infrastructure. Some good dialogue and questions ensued. The following portion of the committee, we received the report from the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee dated May 2nd, and also received the report of the Communities in Bloom Committee dated on May 7th, and the meeting was adjourned at 6:18 p.m.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. I appreciate the update. We have no motions from that committee. We're going to move into the staff reports for the consent agenda. It's DEV 020-24, zoning bylaw amendment application 189, 191, 195, and 197 Duckworth Street in Ward 1. Seeing that's not held, Councilor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'd like to declare potential pecuniary interests as myself and my parents own properties that are part of this rezoning application D30-019-2021 as outlined in staff report Dev 020-24. So I will not be participating in the matter.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Has the conflict been noted?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall, it has.
And will that be able to be included in a separate report for purposes of declarations next week?
Definitely.
Thank you so much. We'll now move on to the next item, which is the Adult Crossing Guard Program, DEV 021-24,
Hold, please.
held by Councillor Corser. DEV 027-24, Proposed Housing Community Improvement Plan.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Thompson. I'm going to, at this point, just so we can get it out of the way, Councillor Morales, I think it's probably the appropriate time to declare.
Yes, Mayor Nuttall. Out of abundance of caution at this meeting, I'll declare potential pecuniary interest for the purposes of this meeting and update council as necessary for the next meeting on the CFP.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. I'm going to move, that was again held by Deputy Mayor Thompson, if we could hold that into a separate report, Madam Clerk, for next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Could Councillor Morales, for the record, just state the purpose of his conflict, because we need that for the record. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Purpose of the conflict is we're deciding the terms of reference and the amounts of monies for a program that may affect me financial gain, potential financial gain or not. There's lots up in the air, and there's content in there that doesn't affect me whatsoever. So out of abundance of caution for this meeting, I'll be declaring potential conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor. DEV 028-24, Sydenham Wells and Penetanguishene Road, no parking anytime in Ward 1. It's approved. EMT 002-24, the 2023 Budget and Business Plan Year-End Report.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Rietma. FIN 007-24, the 2024 Capital Project Status Report. That's approved. FIN 008-24, 2022-23 Annual Procurement Activity Report and Bylaw Update. That's approved. LGL 002-24, Development Charge Credit Agreement, Hewitt's Creek Secondary Plan, Area Force Main and Pumping Station Ward 10. That's approved. FIN 003-24, the 2023 Municipal Stormwater Management System Report. That's approved. REC 001-24, Recreation and Sport Community Grant Adjudication Process.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Kungle. REC 002-24, Bright Futures Barrie Grant Adjudication Process.
Hold, please.
That's held by Councillor Kungle. Sorry, it's not held by Councillor Kungle. It's held by Councillor Corser. And we're going to jump back to the first item that was held, and that would be by Councillor Councillor Kungle, Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee. Councillor Kungle, could you please put the item on the floor?
Yes, I'd like to put the item on the floor as printed.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, I believe there was some names that were provided.
Yes, through you, Mayor Nuttall, if Councillor Kungle will indulge me, I guess. So we had for the council representation, Councillor Kungle and Mayor Nuttall. For number C, we have the Barrie Area Ontario Health Team. For number D, we have the Simcoe County District School Board, as they are the largest school board in Barrie. For number E, we have the County of Simcoe to represent the social services. For section F, we have the Child, Youth, and Family Services. And for item G, we have the Simcoe Muskoka Family Connections. And then the other representations from the Police Services Board and the police chief as per the legislation. And there was an addition of a potential representation for the group Safe Barrie.
Okay, thank you. So all of those have been moved by, who's moving that on behalf?
I'll move that.
That's moved by Councillor Kungle. That is on the floor. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the filling of the slots for this Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan? I'm seeing none, so we're going to vote on the slate as an amendment. All those in favor, it carries. We're now going to vote on the main motion as amended. All those in favor, it carries. Let's move on to the next item, which is the lease of additional speed camera. Councillor Harvey, the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put it on the floor as printed. Start off with a couple of questions to staff, if I could, please. And it's a bit of a regurgitation of when this went to committee. So through you to staff, this has always been mentioned to us as a pilot project, and typically what's the length of a pilot project?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. So typically, pilot projects do last around a year or so. But in this case, because the intention really was to move the cameras every couple months to get through basically all 10 zones, or all 10 wards rather, we'll be looking at most likely it's going to be about a 2-year total pilot project to be able to do that full rotation of all 10 wards.
Great. And just one other question as a follow-up. A few weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, we passed some capital funding and 2 new positions And some of that capital is involving building some offices, I understand, at the Provincial Offences Court over on Cedar Point for the future junior prosecutor and screeners. What is the anticipated completion date of that capital project?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, we still have to, now that Council's approved the funds to do that, we have to work with corporate facilities on some timelines. We're hoping for fall to winter of this year.
Okay, thank you. So this is where I struggle to support this. I'm fully supportive of the camera system. I've seen it work in other municipalities. Obviously, as someone that used to be in law enforcement myself, we had it in our municipality for the last 3 years. It works. There's no two buts about that. But where I struggle with this is where we're only about 4 or 5 months into a pilot, and we've already received information in a previous staff report that the provincial offences officers that are monitoring the cameras are not able to keep up with the current flow, and that they've been concentrating on only the school time hours when it comes to enforcing and issuing the offense notices. And then the fact that we just recently passed the alternative penalty system, where then screeners will be in place, which will expedite the process in processing tickets, but that's not going to happen until at least the end of this year. So I'm just struggling to see where this is actually going to flow appropriately with having the appropriate staff in place, having their offices in place so that way these screeners can do their jobs, and basically doubling the amount of tickets that our current provincial offences officers can't keep up with. So I'm just really struggling to see why we would be putting more pressure on the system when it seems to me that the system can't keep up with the current flow. The other issue that I have is when it comes to the signage, and depending on how this goes, I may do a further amendment, but right now what we've been seeing as the signs are getting moved around is they're not being signed the same way. Our locations are only set up so that way we only have one sign that says that it's 50 kilometers an hour, or 40 kilometers an hour, I should say, during 7 to 5, Monday to Friday. Whereas if you go into many other municipalities that are using the camera locations, they actually have 2. Same thing with the camera, the little square sign with the camera being used, they're putting 2 out. Whereas even here, what I've been seeing is each of the 2 locations are being signed differently. One location, the camera sign is as you're entering the area, and the other location is literally physically attached to the pole where the camera is situated. Now that does, believe it or not, actually meet provincial legislation, because it just says that you have to have the sign at or near where the camera is situated. But I've never seen any other municipality put the signs up like that, even though it is permitted. I would just like to see, I don't want this program to be the aha, we caught ya, or looked at as being a cash grab, because we know it's not a cash grab, because if you look at the numbers that are released by Guelph, they're actually only seeing about 15% of the revenue that the whole system is bringing in. So it just shows that the cost to run the program is extremely expensive. However, it does slow people down. So I'm happy that it doesn't look like a cash grab, because if all of a sudden 50% of the funds were coming into the city, then it would be a different conversation. But I just don't know why we're, in my opinion, taking the cart before the horse and adding more cameras until we've got all the pieces in place for this alternative penalty system to be up and running. And then that would be the appropriate time, in my opinion, to add more cameras. Because the other thing, too, if you look around, like York Region, who's had the camera system for 3, almost 4 years, they've got 3 cameras for the entire region. Now, they were just on regional roads because of the way their government set up there. And it's only just now that towns like Newmarket and stuff have expressed interest in having cameras on their town roads. But I just think we're pushing this along too quick. I think there's many bugs behind the scenes that need to be fixed out before we consider adding more cameras, and I think this is just putting a little bit too much strain on a system that I don't think can keep up as it is by what I've seen and what that previous staff memo definitely indicated. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, on the timing, is there any further comment you have?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to members of council, now that we have the approval to start working on the administrative monetary program, we are bringing the bylaws forward to get the ball rolling before summer recess. We anticipate with all the MTO approval timelines and things that we have to meet for that, we are hoping to get that up and running by fall of this year, so September, October is what we're targeting. And that, again, depends on our work with the MTO. With respect to the number of tickets being processed, we are bringing on 2 more officers. They should be starting within the next couple weeks. The Ontario Traffic Council are doing training sessions based on municipal need now, so they should be able to be trained. These new provincial offences officers should be able to be trained by the end of June and be brought on board to start processing tickets. And the screening officers we wouldn't retain until we had the monetary program in place and had some approval, had some I guess, timelines in place for it to be implemented.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from members of council? Not seeing any. My comments would be, first of all, I don't believe that the rate of tickets is going to be maintained as it was in the first few months. I would guess that it's actually come down between then and now. I don't know for sure, but that would be a guess. Based on the fact that we put them in the highest volume, highest speed areas first. So the data would suggest that you're going to see a reduction over time, which is one of the reasons that I didn't want to just proceed with the number of hirings before that we were talking about. I totally understand cart before horse, Councillor, and I think that that's good. You know, it's always good to step back, take a second look, make sure that we are making the right decision. It sounds like there's an alignment between when we'd actually be able to get this going in terms of the fall and when the additional officers and space is going to be ready for them. So for me, I feel comfortable at this point, but I think we, especially on high revenue items, we all need to do gut checks to make sure that we're doing this for the right reason. And finally, to those who've had tickets, more specifically those who've had repeated tickets, you know, I think that we've been very prudent with how we're approaching this, in the sense that your ticket is a donation towards a traffic calming measure somewhere in the city, whether that's a camera, or the individuals who work on the cameras, or physical infrastructure, or perhaps others going forward. So I think that there's not a, hey, let's increase the number of tickets so that we can, you know, have lunch on Friday. This is increase the safety and reduce the speeds, and those that don't, we're going to reinvest in safety on our streets around the city. And as long as that's the philosophy we're acting with, I think we'll be in good shape as a city council. With that, I'll call the vote. All those in, just question myself, you didn't put an amendment on the floor, did you? No. So all those in favor of the motion as written, it carries.
Separate report, please.
Separate report is your request, Madam Clerk. Could you confirm, please?
Yes, separate report.
Separate report, thank you. And we're now going to go on to DEV 021-24. That's the Adult School Crossing Guard Program. Councillor Corser.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and I'd like to just ask a couple of simple questions to staff regarding the report. On page 3, paragraph 11. Oh, sorry, I have to put the motion on the floor as printed. Skipped right over that, didn't I? Okay. Now, if I may, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to staff, I'm sure I'm asking Ms. Banfield, for the adult crossing guards for paragraph 3, page 3, paragraph 11, January 20th, the numbers were significantly lower with relation to incidents that were happening in at these crossing points around schools. I'm assuming that number is significantly lower due to pandemic and to the closures of schools, which would make absolute sense. And I know you sent me an email, and I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet. Did you? I asked about the numbers. Where were the 4 incidents that happened in that time frame, and I was wondering if you'd be able to enlighten me to where those incidents happened, or what timeline.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. So one accident was at Mapleview Drive East and Country Lane. One was right at 18 Dunnett Drive. One was at Coulter Street and Bayfield Street. And the other one was Edge Hill Drive and Ann Street North.
Thank you very much. And I know that you supplied that information. I just didn't get to it. Thank you. And I did ask, and there was another question I wanted to ask. So yes, with relation to, would this program going forward, as the city being funding this, would this be portionally funded through the automated speed camera revenues, or would that be a decision that would go across council at that time?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. So the staff recommendation is to receive the information, and if council wished to move forward, there would need to be a funding source identified at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from members of council? Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through you to staff, now I understand the rationale as to how the 9 locations were obtained, but this is where sometimes I know one thing might look great on a spreadsheet, but then in real life, it doesn't necessarily equate to what I'm seeing and hearing from residents. So the location at Coghlan and Ems, which is just behind the Food Basics Plaza, just around the corner from actually the Peggy Hill Community Center. In 6 years, I haven't had one complaint about that location. So I'm just kind of curious how that location made the list, but then drawing a blank on the name of the school that backs onto Veterans Drive by Mapleton, and they have their own separate signalized crosswalk that goes across Veterans. However, I fairly regularly get emails, calls from parents where people are disobeying the red and going right through, along with the intersections at Harvey Road and Veterans, and also ESSA and Veterans, because some of the kids going to that school live on the other side of ESSA Road. And most of the issues at those 2 intersections are typically people making right and left-hand turns. So I'm just kind of curious, how does a quiet little intersection that's right in the middle of a subdivision that's only 1 lane each direction end up making the list, but then these other ones that are on 4 and 5 lane roads where we have had a lot of complaints didn't make the list?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. Staff did an extensive studies at most schools. I think we did 112 locations. We studied several different locations, and the way the exposure index works, which is what we use to determine the warrants, it looks at the pedestrians crossing in mixture of vehicles turning, conflicting turning movements, and we have a different exposure index for an always stop versus a traffic signal versus a ped signal. So in the instance of the first one, Coughlin, we had close to 50 pedestrians with, I don't have the data right in front, I can't see it, but we did have, it made the exposure index for an always stop. So we had the amount of pedestrians crossing combined with the conflicting turning movements.
And just a follow-up to that, are you able to tell me whether or not the other locations that I mentioned on veterans, were they part of the 112 that were studied? We can take it offline.
Yeah, we'll take it offline, yeah.
It kind of looks like he's got a big wad of papers he's trying to go through, so yeah, we can take that piece offline. Just a couple other follow-ups, and I'm just kind of wondering about the funding piece of this, and where I'm comparing it to is more recently there's been some articles in the news in regards to New Tecumseh actually considering taking away their crossing guard program, which I'm not so sure is necessarily the right direction, but that's because I get the need for them at certain areas. But when it comes to the funding, the cost that's being proposed here is significantly different than the cost that New Tecumseh currently has, and you're only proposing 2 additional crossing guards. So for their 7 crossing guards and 4 alternates, their 2024 budget is $85,000 to pay the guards and an administrative budget of $27,000. But what's being proposed is only 2 more guards that are going to be between $140,000 and $190,000, along with a supervisor that's going to be up to $114,000, and then a vehicle that's going to be $40,000. Well, $35,000 and then $5,000 a year. So I'm just trying to grasp why we need to have something so different than what another community already has that seems to be operational and has been for several years.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. Certainly on bullet 14 of the staff report outlines, as I said, and first off, sorry, we can't comment on New Tecumseh. I'm not sure how they do their math. Potentially they have different staff levels already that they didn't need to hire extra people. As I said, I haven't looked at their program specifically. But ultimately, staff, we laid this out, I think, pretty clearly in terms of what the going rate is for salaries, understanding that we don't have any of these pieces of infrastructure in place. This would be an absolutely brand new project, no existing staff, no existing resources available to do any of it, quite frankly. And that's why, as I said, the numbers are the way the numbers are presented. And really, that's really all I think I can offer in that respect.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, floor is yours.
Thank you, and through you. Thank you for the report. I appreciate it. I think this is a long time coming, and I know there'll be many residents that are pleased that we're actually taking a serious look at this. I do have some questions and some concerns. One, I think, and I appreciate the due diligence that was done in identifying the 9 locations. I'm not going to challenge the data or the approach in identifying that, but from my perspective, how many elementary schools are there in the city? Is there 50?
I believe there's somewhere around 50.
Somewhere around 50. So we've identified 9 of 50 schools. And for me, I think, the crossing guard program, and there's none in Ward 10, unfortunately. How do I tell parents, well, your school or your kid didn't make the cut or make the list? So for me, just identifying the 9 and already hearing from Councillor Harvey, the one that was identified for him is the one that doesn't get any complaints. I get attendant complaints in a couple of my schools and it's not listed here. So I feel like that's problematic. I would have liked to have seen a more sort of equitable solution across the city. to the costs associated with it. So if we break it down, if it's $400,000 in 9 schools, that's $45,000 a school to hire, a crossing guard and run the program. And I think that's exorbitant for those, just again, limiting it to the 9 specific schools. The effectiveness of crossing guards, again, I have slight concerns, and I've done my research and I've looked at sort of, there's limited data on actually measuring it. And I think it's more, the parents' perception or the community's perception of a crossing guard program actually enhancing safety. But when you look at the data, that's not always the case. It doesn't actually show it impacts, drivers' habits or accidents. So I also question $45,000 at a school, and really is it going to have an impact? So if we do proceed with this or not, I definitely want to make sure data collection is a part of it so we can compare it to other measures, whether it be, the cameras that we're using or changes to curb or raised intersections, just so that we can actually look at the effectiveness of this. And my fourth concern is really having the city take complete accountability for the program. I would have loved to have seen a more collaborative approach with the school boards and the schools. So when I've thought about this, I've, and talked to a couple of you, and, how do we proceed with this, but maybe in a much more realistic way, in a more equitable way, in a more comprehensive and collaborative fashion. So I do have an amendment, but I would like to actually hear some dialogue, but I'm happy to put it on the table too. But it's really looking at allowing all schools to participate in this program, so opting in, and contributing a portion of the funding to support it. So schools could decide, the parent councils could decide whether or not, their specific school needs this, whether, say, safety concerns there. They would say, yes, we want to be part of it, we want to buy in, we would fund part of it, and maybe I'll read the amendment. Maybe that's probably easier. Put it on the table and we can have dialogue. So I will do that if that's okay. I'm just going to pull it up. So amendment to a DEV 02124 adult school crossing guard program to delete paragraph 1 and replace it with the following: that annual funding of $150,000 be allotted to fund school traffic patrolling programs funded from the automated speed enforcement program commencing the fall 2024, subject to the following. Schools must submit an application to be considered by the Community Safety Committee. Funding is capped at $3,000 a year per school. And C, to have data collected in order to compare the effectiveness of this program against any other traffic calming safety measures, including automated speed enforcement in raised intersections. And if I could, Mayor Little, just elaborate a little bit on some of the math there and the allocations that I've identified. That's okay. So again, looking at the first case scenario, we've got 9 schools and it's roughly $45,000 a school because we have, we have to hire a manager and we need a car. I think if we do it this way, it's much more cost effective. And if you actually look at each school who wants to buy into this, hiring a crossing guard at $15 an hour, 3 hours a day, as staff said, so 15 hours a week, and there's 194 days in a school year. The cost would be about $9,000 for the school to run it. So if we provided a third of that funding, it would then put the onus on the school and the parents and the community to say, yes, we want to opt in, the city's in, they're going to contribute a third. We could put pressure on the board to contribute. Schools could look at ways to fundraise as well to participate. And it's more of a joint effort. I think a much more equitable approach, and it really does allow us within our wards to work with our schools and work with our communities to really look at how we can take advantage of city funds to roll out this type of program, and also make sure that we've got the data in place to really look at the effectiveness of the dollars that we're spending on it.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Kungl, then I have Councillor Corser.
Thank you. And thank you for trying to put forward an amendment to kind of explore this, Councillor Hamilton. In thinking about it, for me, it would be looking at probably I'm not opposed to that, but probably the timing of it. So if I'm thinking about Ward 3 and I've got 2 schools in this report, that's really just for information, but I would say the biggest piece for me is, wanting to see how we use some of the funding through the revenue of the cameras around speed cushions. And I recognize that there's an aspect in the report that talks a little bit about pros and cons to this, but the context of it being a city program or a non-city program. I think I would promote that it's a non-city program, and I'm not sure where that fits in the amendment, if I caught all of the context of that, or where there's options. So where we do consider maybe part of the revenue budget to put aside and say, this might support up to a couple of number of schools to say, if you can incentivize your school to opt in, then here's access to funding. For others, maybe use them for speed cushions. Because I would say, like on my schools in particular, there's not enough speed cushions to go around 8 for my ward. And I think I'm hearing that would be a priority area where I know in my last, 6 years, there are roads I can't get to. Or I'm splitting up speed cushions to try and do something, but I know they're more effective if you can put 2 together. So for now, I would say I'm not opposed to there being kind of a, how do we incentivize schools to come to this and put something on the table to help them be a partner, but that it's not our liability, responsibility, or staffing, that's a school program. I think we still committed in the budget $20,000 to $40,000 at some point in time that supported the training. I believe that's still something we do. We don't do it, but I believe that's through Barrie Police Services, if I'm correct, and that's for them to use it to then bring in a trainer, do some schools engagement, but that's really within the school to use. I'm not sure if it's actually been used over the past year or two, but maybe we can revisit that when we look at what are we investing and if that's still in the budget, if that's something that we've been doing around safe crossings. So at this point in time, I'm not opposed to it, but I'm wondering if that's more of a, can we have broader conversations about how we use the funding and what's eligible for revenue out of the ESA cameras, and then whether or not we'd put money aside for schools to opt in into an intake form for the next budget.
Okay. Thank you.
I just was questioning something that was said, but I can wait.
So can you wait until I go to Councillor Courser, then I'll come back to Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Courser.
Our quick conversation before we cracked open this can of worms, it just kind of dawned on me that this is a really good idea. I like to see the onus being on the school board to chip in. My challenge with this is it will not be equitable with different schools in different areas of our city. And I'll tell you why. Because I know the school my son goes to, they have to fundraise for tissues. Like, we've got parent councils that are fundraising for, rolls of paper towels for the classrooms and supplies. So there are neighborhoods in our city that are more financially stable than others. So my concern is if we're tying the ability to opt into this program to these schools, pressuring the parents and to pressure the schools or to get buy-in from the schools, there are certain schools that just don't have the money. And they can't raise the money for their own in-school things, crayons, just different things. I remember, Play-Doh. I made buckets of it when I was at home. Trust me, any parent out there, just buy it. It's just not worth making it. It's too much of a pain in the butt. But anyway, if you can. But these are the kind of things that they're struggling to pay for within the schools. And I don't know if it would be equitable to ask schools, parent councils in certain schools that are of a lower income area or lower income student base they get left out of this program because they can't raise the money to opt into it. And that would be a very serious concern of mine. But as far as pressuring the school board to chip into this, I think that we should absolutely be knocking on their door to buy in for this. But the specific schools is disconcerting to me.
Thank you, Councillor Courser. Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Morales.
Thank you, and through you, and just to respond to Councillor Courser, I guess that's the two options that we have, right? There's an equity in only identifying 9 schools, and then there's an equity in offering it to everybody, but having some schools in a better position to be able to fundraise versus others. So that's sort of the two options we have to weigh out, right? And so valid points that you raised. Just for Councillor Kungl, are you proposing that we would still move ahead with the staff report and the line locations, but in addition to that, we would look at, I just wasn't sure what you're saying, in addition to that, we would look at setting aside funds for other safe measures? Or were you thinking the amendment, yes, but that $3,000 that we are contributing to schools that they would opt in, it doesn't necessarily have to go to a crossing guard program. It could go to other safety measures that they would want within their school?
Yeah, so for me, I'm supportive of just receiving the report right now for information. But if there's something, and maybe it's a broader conversation around considering this, and maybe that's mayor's task force or coming back to what are the elements of the revenue of the camera generated funding after we know what's left from other investments we made around staffing, to say if we care about safety measures, what's a safety measure? And could this be something where there's a bit of money that says, okay, do we or don't we care about having schools maybe opt in for those that are interested, or potentially something's better than nothing? So those that can, does it support safety, and do they care about it enough to kind of be able to tie in if they've got the funding? If not, we know it's a gap overall citywide, and so how do we move the cameras, and or how are we supporting certain wards who want more speed cushions? But basically, how are we using that revenue, not just for more cameras and the support, which has its own merits as a program component, but now what's the other additional infrastructure we can explore? And I would maybe say that that's where I would see some funding set aside to see if we pilot that and see if any schools come forward.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I like the amendment from Councillor Hamilton. The one thing I guess I would pivot on the amendment is I want to reconcile, I guess, the 9 locations that were objectively chosen by staff and the spirit of the pilot program. I know we haven't stamped that, so I'll say the spirit of the pilot program of those 9 locations, and then also find a way to integrate moving forward after we produce a deliverable, after we have a proof of concept, both to the parent councils, to the principals, vice principals, community, parent councils, and school board, and go, look, we've run this pilot for 12 months. It's worked at these locations that were, and I repeat, objectively chosen by staff. And then after that point, we move forward with a funding model that has the accountability KPIs and opt-in from the parent councils. Why? There was a lot of emphasis, and I recall, I don't have the transcript in front of me, but if I recall, there was a lot of emphasis on saying, let's be careful about this moving forward, let's not give false promises. If we move forward, we'll probably do a pilot, and staff, you go out and pick the locations, because otherwise, you know, how do we say to somebody, like, this location didn't get chosen? So I think what we have in front of us, members of council, is so the selection of the 9 locations. So if we leave that intact and go forward, we produce, again, a proof of concept that is objective. And then moving forward, I'm sure a lot of schools that didn't get chosen in this location are going to be giving calls to the parent councils, to the counselors, and to the principals specifically going, how has it been working? Is it worth it? Because if it's worth it, we're going to make this a priority at our parent council for the next 6 months. And so schools that may take more time to fundraise could have a bigger runway in order to do that. And now you have a proof of concept. So I do like the wording of Councillor Hamilton's amendment of the KPIs, and I even like them submitting an application to the Community Safety Committee. The only thing is, the reason I want to reconcile that with these 9 locations is when the application's coming to the Community Safety Committee, it's being decided by councillors, which is no issue, but there's now that human aspect that I know there was a lot of concern with when we were even asking the staff to do this, of like, you pick the objective locations and that's it. So I guess my comments, Mayor Nuttall, are I support the amendment if it was, I support the, sorry, I'm getting indications.
Just a point of clarity, this would allow anybody, there's no yes or no. If the school raises the 2/3, then, so just a point of clarity, like, we wouldn't be able to opt out.
Deputy, I'm going to let him finish and then make that comment, yeah.
Okay, so you know what, I'll take my time, Mayor Nuttall, and maybe pivot in the form of a question so it doesn't seem like I missed something. So, Councillor Hamilton, would this funding would this funding essentially replace the pilot project and essentially be, if you can fundraise the money, you will match you in subsidy? Is that essentially what your amendment is intending to do?
If I can, and through you, Mayor Nuttall, yes. So my amendment's actually replacing this program, because this program requires city to own it, right? So city's hiring a manager, city's getting a car, city has the liability, city's assuming the risk, is a completely city-run program. My amendment actually does away with what's being proposed and saying, let's take a more collaborative approach where the school actually hires and runs the program, and we contribute to it in a collaborative manner. So each school would have an option of whether or not they wanted to pursue this. They could hire a crossing guard. We would pitch in a third of the cost. We could work with the school board and try to get them to pitch in, another third of the cost. And the school is left to fundraise based on their priorities, right? Some schools this will be a priorities based on parent pressure, and in some it might not be. So, but I think it does away with the whole city running this and taking complete accountability, liability, and risk with it. And it does lessen the overall costs, because you can see what we propose, $400,000, $45,000 a school, as opposed to a collaborative approach where the school actually runs it, and it's $9,000 a school.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that, and I'll just quickly wrap up, Mayor Nuttall. Okay, so now I understand it. I like the idea of reallocating the responsibility maybe where this needs to be. So I like that approach of the amendment, Councillor Hamilton. I do have to agree with Councillor Courser a lot. This just, and it's not on purpose, but this just creates the conditions where parent councils who have experience fundraising, experience organizing will rally. We all know schools, I'm not going to pick any in specific, schools that have the fancy sports team uniforms and the ones that don't. And then there's schools that they can barely get through disciplinary appeals and things of that nature. So, and the energy of parents doesn't reflect the severity of traffic reality. Sometimes they're one and the same, but sometimes they're not. So I'm not saying no, I'm just saying now I get what you were saying, and I'm somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to hand the floor back to you, Mayor Nuttall, because I think there could be some good discussion on this.
Deputy Mayor Thompson, then Councillor Ripa.
So I will be supporting the amendment, and I do understand that some of the concerns. The one thing I would like to see is that we could actually increase the portion that we help with the grant if we could determine that we've actually increased the walkability of the school. So they measure about the drop-offs, because that would solve another problem with a lot of streets being, burdened by the drop-offs and pickup. So if we made a safer way optically for people to walk to school, that we would increase the funding by a little bit. So there would be an incentive to get people out of the cars and walking to school. But I understand the equity part of certain schools, but the way the staff report is to receive, this is, do you want a piece of the pie or none of the pie? This is a way that it'll give people the opportunity to do it, or the other is way cost inhibitive to the taxpayer. And I think, sometimes we've got to look. It's hard to subsidize everything for everybody. There's certain things that we're always going to have to subsidize. So I will support the amendment.
Councillor Ripa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, this is a joint problem between ourselves and the school boards. And I think the amendment that we're looking at goes in the right direction, in that we're building a collaborative approach between ourselves and the school boards. I think that I'm prepared to support it, but I really would like to see the school board itself play a big role in this, because I think that, as Deputy Mayor says, we have an opportunity here to change behavior in terms of walkability and improving safety at the same time. So I'm in support. I think there are a lot of wrinkles here to still be worked out, and I think that when staff contact the boards and say, hey, this is what we're thinking, I think there will be some discussion, and I think that's really important, because I think we really need to work together with our school boards to resolve this.
Thank you, Councillor Courser, and then Councillor Negussi.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Council, I can't vehemently disagree with the idea enough of having individual schools, especially there are maybe we can look at There is a record of what schools are financially, the demographic of certain schools. There's a record being kept. There are certain schools in our city that there's a study been done, like they're ranked through the school board of which schools have lower demographic for finances than others. So I'm hoping that we could maybe bake that in somehow into a motion like this, because again, I do believe that some of the schools that are in lower income areas, parents are working multiple jobs. There's a lot of single parents trying to make ends meet. Times are tough as it is, and they don't have the bandwidth or time to volunteer, let alone the money to contribute a lot of the time. And I'm afraid that it's going to be messaging that, only kids from middle-class families deserve safe neighborhoods. And I don't want to see that kind of messaging be misconstrued from what comes from our city hall. And I really do not like the idea of having, depending on schools with lower demographic for finances, being left out of the equation if they cannot organize and fundraise to have this kind of a program. I am supportive of the program, absolutely, and I'm supportive of bringing this to the school board, to get the school board involved to kick in some money, because I do believe it's some of their responsibility for sure. Absolutely. But I don't think it should be, the onus should not be on individual schools to do so. Thank you.
Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nadeau. I just have a clarity question to Councillor Hamilton. In my email, it says 100,000 and funding is acceptable at 2,000. So I see some change on that. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, happy to answer that. Sorry, I was doing math, and in my original math, I didn't think it was sufficient enough to cover what the school's needs would be to do the program. So yes, we changed it to $150 and $3,000 for each school. That being said, I'm listening as Councillor Corser is talking right now, and she's really hitting home with this, because I absolutely do not want to be sending a message that only schools that can afford it and only communities that can afford it. And so I'm looking at, we've got two options here. We're spending $350,000, $400,000 on 9 schools, or do we up our contribution and still spend that money, but have the schools run the program, right? You can opt in and the city will reimburse you. Maybe it's $4,000, maybe it's $5,000, I'm not really sure. So anyway, answer your question, but I think maybe we can have some more conversation on what that price tag is.
So maybe I may ask to staff. Mayor Nadeau, I don't think the city will solve this issue, with a single hand. Somehow, the school board should be part of this program. I know they said no, but is there any way we can refer to staff or ask staff to reach out to school board again, at least to come up with some kind of, it's not only money actually. I know some parents are willing to involve in volunteerism.
So yes, we can always refer to staff. I think that they've done their work on this, Councillor. I think that we've had the answer from the school board. They were sitting right there during community safety. I think the only way that they get involved is by us approving something and essentially public shaming them into being involved. And I'm not sure that works in the end, to be honest with you. So you can refer to staff, and there can be a motion to refer to staff, but I'm not sure what they're going to do other than make a phone call and get told the same thing we were told 6 months ago when they were here. And I think it just wastes more time and punts it down the road.
Okay. Community safety is one of the biggest issues in our city. I've been involving in at least 6 town hall meetings, and what I learned as a new council is different ward has different issues. But one of the most common problem is community safety, traffic, speeding. So I really like the staff report, but I'm inclined to the amendment because I think is going to help the city. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay, before we keep going, I have Councillor Harvey, I've got Councillor Kungle, I think, as well. Councillor Reitman, did I end up going to you? You're good for now? I apologize. I'm going to just say a few things and try to cut through some of this stuff. So, super honest time, I'm not sure that a crossing guard is more effective than a planter tree, or more effective than a raised intersection or a speed bump, or an intersection pedestrian signal or a stoplight. And staff are not proposing that we go ahead with anything here, right? So it's not a choice between what Councillor Hamilton's put forth and 9 locations from the city. It's actually a choice between the two things that have been on the floor are 0 and a $3,000 subsidy per school-ish. So my belief is this, that we're going to go and do the work, and we're going to monitor what happens around speed bumps and raised intersections and stoplights and crossing guards, et cetera, and it's going to come back. And the lowest reduction in speed and increase in safety is going to end up being crossing guards. But I do not know that for sure. And that's why when we originally had this conversation at community, I think it was community safety, there was a presentation. I'd asked for a pilot project. I did not envision a 9-location pilot project. I know I'm an outlier. I'd be fine with 1. But I think as the conversations have been had, it's, well, how do you choose the one? And, you know, you've got somebody who's been fighting in the community really, really, really hard for this to take place, which is why we're all talking about it. And in this current staff report, they're on the outside looking in, right? I am very, very, very familiar with inequity. Very familiar with inequity. You know, I grew up with very, very, very little. And in some cases, my school didn't get what the other schools did. St. Peter's didn't have a football team until, I think, about 8 years ago, because they couldn't afford the equipment to have a football team. Innisdale had one, right? There was a lot of difference in what's offered at different schools. Barrie Central had an incredible music program, not offered at Innisdale, right? There naturally is inequity around the city, and I wish we could stroke a pen and fix that. I don't think it's going to happen. I think as we're looking at offering something to the community to say, we're willing to be part of the solution, but we can't manage this. And if we do manage it, our costs are going to go from what should be a few $1,000 to $45,000 per door, per school. But we're willing to come to the table and be part of it. And schools, we want you to be innovative on how you provide it. Is it a volunteer program that we're putting $3,000 towards? Is it a paid person? Is it, you know, there's many different variations of what could result out of it, and somebody come up with a way better model than the 11 of us are going to think about around this table. But to say that we're going to provide 0 because some schools are going to be, it's going to be easier to raise money than others, I think is a very difficult position to take. We as a council don't look at when we're putting out these initiatives, we don't consider, is this a low-income neighborhood or is this not a low-income neighborhood if we're putting out an IPS, an intersection pedestrian signal, or a speed bump. I think we say, where's the traffic issue and how do we help? But that's when we're in control. And what's being proposed here is that we are not in control, but that we will try to be a financial help at the table. I do lots of fundraising in the community. I know many of you do lots of fundraising in the community. If there's a school, and I can think of a couple, and I'm not going to say them because it's not where, like, I don't want to embarrass anything or anyone, that needs a little bit of help, then, my door is always open. I know Councillor Corser, your door is always open, and so is everyone else. So I don't think these are things that we can't manage. But I can tell you that we're not going to manage anything if we don't do anything. And I also think at the end of this, Councillor Kungl, you're mentioning the amount of money that's going to be available. We don't know. Hard infrastructure, right? I honestly believe today the hard infrastructure will end up with a safer environment than crossing guards. But I would like the information to back that up. I really, really would. So that's where I'm at on after, I think this is our 5th meeting going through this subject. That's where I'm at on it. We're not going to do anything perfect. If we pick 9 schools, there's 41 of them that are going to be upset. And if we pick no schools, there's 50 of them upset. And if we offer 3,000 per, maybe still 50 are upset. I don't know. So I have Councillor Harvey, and then I had Councillor Kungl, and then Councillor Corser. No, we're still speaking to the amendment. Yeah. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and I appreciate your comments and stuff. And I know this has been a live conversation that would date back prior to even the previous council, when Councillor Morales was on council for his first term. I remember watching it, and the only reason it never went anywhere was the exorbitant cost in regards to it. I do like the amendment that's on the table. And actually, it would be a bit of a trailblazing amendment, to be quite honest with you, because I don't know of any other places in the province where the school boards have been a partner and actually manage this. But it's definitely far easier to manage, because especially if you were to, again, this would be up to the school board to decide, but if it was up to someone at each individual school to monitor their 1 or 2 crossing guards wherever they decide, it's a heck of a lot easier to manage at that small local level at each school than it is to try and have one supervisor trying to manage. With the size of our city, I wouldn't even want to potentially guess how many crossing guard locations we could end up if this moves forward. So I really do like the amendment, and the only thing is I don't think there's enough money on the table to really get them to bite. I'd actually even be in support of even doubling the amounts, because realistically, I don't think 3,000 a school is going to do it. Whereas if we were to double it to 300K and 6 per school, I think then they've got something to work with, and it has a heck of a lot better chance of getting off the ground at the school level than it does with what's being proposed. And I did have a little quick sidebar with Councillor Hamilton about this before I brought this forward, so I will just kind of leave that as a friendly and let her to decide, because it is her amendment.
Councillor, there's a request for a friendly. Is it a friendly or an unfriendly?
I think it's friendly. I think we're along the same lines. Again, we want to incentivize schools to participate, right? Not create additional barriers or not throw small amounts of money that really aren't going to be effective or impactful. So for me, trying to figure out what that magic number is, I don't know, but I am absolutely open to taking the friendly and increasing it from 3,000 to I'm hearing 6. Anybody got a 6,000? I'll take 6,000. I think, that does help address Councillor Corser's comments too in creating, at least a more equitable approach across schools that do have a hard time fundraising, and really giving them a substantial amount of money to say, if you want to opt in, this is covering more than half, right? This is covering 2/3 now of it. I think that's a lot more appetizing for most schools. And again, it'd be up to them to sort of prioritize. Like you said, there's always going to be inequities, but I think we're at least minimizing that gap across the city. So happy to take the friendly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kungl, and then Councillor Corser.
So I still have reservations, not in providing money on the table for schools to kind of opt in, but around the scope of this. And so I feel like I need a little bit more in front of me, because without kind of seeing it, my question is timing. So when is the money on the table, and how are we communicating this? Like, I would almost like a first step to be, there's an intention by council to seriously put money on the table here. Who's in? Because I'm making assumptions thinking staff have brought forward a presentation saying just to do citywide, it's $350,000 to $400,000. I'm then assuming one or two schools on different school boards aren't going to opt in and try and run a program with all of that administrative oversight. So like the structure of the program that we're saying needs to happen to operate it citywide, how does that relate to one or two schools as a one-off with a school board? We almost need a school board to opt in, is my assumption. And so I think it's around like who needs to be part of the conversations from an engagement to say, can you do it? And how do we help you get there? And then to say, who really wants to do this, but just financially can't? Like, where do we see interest that may start a different conversation around if the school board says, yeah, we'll cover this much, we'll own the program, but schools are responsible for so much money on their own, then how do we help some of those that may have stronger limitations to get there, and how do we prioritize that? So I get into the nitty-gritty, but for me it's around when we say we'll help them fund the program, you know, what's the threshold and for how long are we committed to? Are we trying to start something and then just say, at some point in time, we want you to own this, we're going to help you get there? Is this seed funding or is this a long-term forever commitment? And so I think for me it's looking at a bit more scope about what's the string attached to the money. And so I think for me I'm comfortable saying we'll put money on the table, but I'd like to know more before it's just here's your access to it, about how they're actually going to make it a successful program and they appreciate the dynamics of how it's operating. So,
Councillor, I hear you. I think maybe, first of all, I thought this was 2025, September.
So we actually, the original proposal or originally staff report, that would probably be fall of 2025, just because it was such a comprehensive program. If we're doing it this way, there's really less startup or lead up time that city would need. So we could actually commence this fall of 2024. Again, there'd be works involved in terms of meeting with the school board and understanding the city, but the funding itself could be available for 2024, fall 2024.
yeah, and I guess if I still have the floor, for me it's around we're coming into school season, so let's help them kind of set up for success and how soon can we make that money available. So for me, I want to continue this conversation. I just don't think I'm able to support it with the current context of the conversation, but I like it to continue. So I'm not sure if we want to defer this to like a mayor's task force to flesh it out a bit more, or.
So I think probably referring it to community services, not community services, community safety committee would be the best route, because we're having a political conversation. We're not having a staff conversation at this point. And then also maybe sending an invite out to the elementary school parent councils to come and participate. I do not want to set an expectation that this fall, I feel like rushed with this fall, and when you're rushing with kids' safety, it's not a great move. So I'm more of the position that if we want to take more time as a council, and that's up to or committee, sorry, it's up to committee to decide. Yes, and let's get them involved, because they may come back and say, the parent councils may come back and say just like no, or the school board may intercede and say yes, or they may intercede and say no. And I think we have a bunch of grant programs right now that we run. We know how to run a grant program. What we're struggling with is there's another organization that's running events every single day that have trouble with both traffic and pedestrian traffic, and we don't know how to make it a safer environment for it. So I'm good with the move, if everyone else is good with the move, over to community safety. Mr. Chair, I see you looking at me like, why would you send that to me?
May I see a certain level of value in putting an offer on the public table and moving the chess pieces. I say that as politely as I can. I see a level of value when somebody puts an offer in the public and the other great stakeholder, that is community, sees it and it's out there by the media. It incentivizes their best response. If we send it to committee, if we do the phone thing again, we've done that. We've been doing that for years. So I don't know if I see value. It doesn't mean it would be bad. If it passes, it passes. That's great. We'll have it at community safety. But there is a certain value at moving your chess piece publicly. And when you have it funded, it moves the lever.
Mr. Cieo.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall and members of committee. In an attempt to bring some clarity, I have to flag that I'm a little concerned because language has become mixed in council's debate. The amendment that was introduced referenced school traffic patrolling programs. Those are not adult crossing guards. And I know that was the word that was introduced. However, when it was repeated back, it was getting flipped. So I wanted to just provide some clarity. The staff report in paragraph 3 speaks to the Highway Traffic Act. School crossing guards can only be employed by the municipality or contracted by the municipality. So the school cannot hire school crossing guards. They can partner with us on funding, but at the end of the day, it would be something that we would have to either directly or indirectly control. And there was different language being used, so I just wanted to make sure that we, before we got too far down the road, clarified that. And the other piece I did want to call out, because there was discussion around money and revenues. I think staff have grave concerns over overcommitting revenues from the speed camera program. We expect the speed camera program to work, which means people will slow down and our revenues will diminish, not increase. So I would caution council about overcommitting. There is definitely some revenue that can be utilized. I would just encourage restraint around overcommitting those dollars because you may find yourself in a deficit position on that program.
Thank you. Just to go back to the verbiage on the first piece of that, the safety patroller program versus a crossing guard program, so the safety patroller program can be run by the school board?
Mayor Nuttall, that is my understanding. In fact, I think some of them currently have them, typically supported through Barrie Police, and we may or may not still have a small grant that we give Barrie Police for that.
Do we have any indication of what schools actually run it?
I think we'd have to get back to you on that, Mayor Nuttall.
Is there, see, that, to me, I think maybe I missed it in the report, but that to me is new information as well, in the sense that I actually would like that to go to community safety, because I'd like them to come in and tell us how they run their program. Because I think we've agreed that we're not going to go and spend $2 million a year on what was the verbiage, Mr. CEO? Adult crossing guard. I need one of those. An adult crossing guard program. But we would like to incentivize some safety around these school zones, like when I know some of us are older than others, but like when we were all kids, we had them, right? Like there was grade 7s or 8s in my elementary school that made sure I crossed at the right place and I crossed safely, and I didn't run out in the middle of the street when I was a kindergarten or grade 1 or 2 or 3. So, yeah, I think I hear you, Councilor Morales. I also think that I'd like to get that information before moving forward.
Do I still have the floor?
Pardon?
Wait, do I still have the floor? I know we merged. Okay. So I think just in light of all that, for me, very happy to continue to have a conversation, but I won't support the amendment at this time. I'll look to receive the information, but do hope it finds its way to another committee for a broader conversation with, I think, what's happening with the money we've invested in some of the school programs for Barrie Police. What could this look like? But then also, once I think we know more about what money might be on the table, what does a bigger picture conversation about investment in safety, additional infrastructure look like? And programs to speed cushions, I think, should be part of the scope of that. My last comment is more of actually a question. When I'm looking at the areas of focus through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Ms. Banfield, to your staff, can you remind me, is there a relationship or not to the 9 that are identified in this to where we identified the prioritization of where to start moving the cameras in school zones? I'm assuming it's separate and apart, but I didn't know if this information, if it didn't have a relationship to the order of where we're rotating those cameras, will it influence it?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Congo, there's no correlation.
Thank you, that's helpful. I know we've just been talking about these schools and the cameras and other pieces and how we're using current infrastructure. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Councillor Corser.
Well, I have issue, through you, Mayor Nuttall, I have issue with Mr. Prowse because he stole all my questions. You answered them all because I was like, yeah.
But you still had your hand up.
I know, but the other piece I had to that was I don't know where I should plop in the questions I want to ask because we are now currently on the motion, the motion. So the amendment, so I wanted to, we're going to vote on that, and then I'd like to, or I can speak to the
I'm not sure
main.
we'll end up voting on that, and once there's a referral motion on the floor, you can't do anything.
Okay, I would like to ask staff, we have 9 locations in front of us here that, as Councillor Congo just alluded to, that are considered problematic or ripe for some sort of safety assistance. My question is as council, as community safety, as whatever, what are we going to do about it? Because obviously these have been flagged as needed, the suggested areas that we should have a crossing guard. So maybe it's a conversation, maybe an item for discussion I can put forward. But obviously these places have been highlighted and we need to readdress them. What we have in front of us.
So is that to council or to?
Yeah, I guess to staff. Has there been any discussion about, because these locations have been flagged, has there been any discussion within traffic or safety that would, has there been any discussion about actions being taken outside, like as an immediate remedy, if not just temporary, but immediate remedy of how we can assist these locations within our city?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. So the identified locations really just show from a statistics perspective that they meet the warrants. It does not mean that the intersections are unsafe. It doesn't mean that the children crossing the streets to access these schools are unsafe. Staff, as you know, will look at school areas all the time and recommend improvements if there are cases. But, I need to stress, these locations aren't unsafe. These are simply the locations that meet the technical criteria for a crossing guard.
Just wondering, because one of the locations which is on the list, I am very familiar with because I received emails and phone calls quite frequently about it. So I'm just wondering if the other locations that are on the list are issues, as Councillor Harvey said, not so in his location. So another offline, maybe an item for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, and through you, I just have a question for Mr. Prowse, and thank you for clarifying the language, because I'm not sure if I caught that or understood that initially. But my question is, in the report it says that the adult crossing guards could be employed by a corporation under contract with a municipality. So it doesn't mean they have to be directly employed by the municipality, but I'm assuming if we had contracts in place with a school, would that not suffice in having an adult crossing guard program? Like, again, if a school bought in, I imagine there would be some sort of contract or relationship with them. Would that not meet the criteria?
Through Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Hamilton. I think Councillor Hamilton, we'd have to take that back and take a look at it. I think the intent here is clear that the municipality owns the responsibility for crossing guards. I know, for example, Newmarket has a hybrid program where they have their own crossing guards, but they have also contracted out a company to provide that service. But at the end of the day, the municipality is responsible for that service. So while there could be, I believe, collaboration and potentially partnership, I think based on my initial reading of this, at the end of the day, the organization responsible for that program would be the City of Barrie. It doesn't matter who funds it or participates in it.
Okay. Then I think I'm going to withdraw my amendment, I think, this time, because I think there's more information. Like, I would like to explore that, because the way I interpret or read it, I do think there's some room for some unique approaches here. And, it might be a Barrie approach, but I think we really have to look at what is within our limitations and what could be done in a collaborative fashion. I definitely like the idea of the adult crossing program, and I think that was sort of what we've heard from the community, as opposed to kids leading kids, which I know we grew up with and it worked well, but it doesn't seem to be, the desire out in the community anymore. So I'm going to remove it. I think, similar to what Councillor Kungl has said, I think we require some more information, but I don't want it to be left. I want to make sure we still have this conversation at Community Safety Committee, and that we can take some offline conversations before that. So I don't know how to do that. Refer it?
So you can withdraw, and then before I take your referral motion that you just put on the floor, I just want to ask one question of clarity. We have events happen all the time. And traffic management is something that happens all the time. And the city is not the one who contracts those pieces of traffic management. We oversee a traffic management report and we sign off on it, but we don't contract those services. So why would it be different with the school board in these scenarios?
Mayor Nuttall, I'm assuming that question is to me. I'm not a lawyer, although I play one on TV, as you well know. I think staff can give you some feedback on that. You are correct. Traffic control is part of, ROA permits and special events, et cetera. I'm simply articulating what the Highway Traffic Act indicates and defines. Are there options? As I had indicated to Councillor Hamilton, there may be. We haven't been asked to explore them, and we can certainly do that. And if there's a referral to a committee, we can certainly have that discussion and get you some additional information around what that could look like.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I'll now accept your referral motion, Councillor Hamilton. All those in favor of referring the Adult School Crossing Guard Program to the Community Safety Committee? It carries. We'll now move on to Deputy Mayor Thompson. You have held DEV 027-24, the Proposed Housing Community Improvement Plan.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the motion on the floor as printed, and I have an amendment.
I just want to note Councillor Morales' conflict of interest here. We're now on the subject. You've put the motion on the floor. You have an amendment. You may read the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. My amendment reads as following: to delete paragraph 5 and replace it with the following: the $2 million from the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund and the $3.6 million, 3,035.50 from the Building Faster Fund received from the provincial government in March 2024. I got the date right. Allocated to the Housing CIP Reserve Fund, and that the balance of the Building Faster Fund be transferred to the Tax Rate Stabilization Reserve. And I can speak to that.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So in the funding formula of the CIP that staff put forward, it's just taking some of the federal money and the provincial money, taking a little bit from both, and then just unparking the money to put in. Right now it's just sitting in limbo, to put it into the Tax Stabilization Reserve. So it's pretty self-explanatory.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The amendment's on the floor. Any questions or comments? Councillor Riepma.
I have a question for staff. With this amendment, I take it it's about $5 million. We're putting in $5.6 million that we're putting in there. Ms. Banfield, I guess, when we do this and we put $5 million in, my question is, how do we measure success? What are we looking to get? I think it's pretty easy to develop a program where we give out money, but I'm really concerned about what we get back. So how many units are we expecting? How many are we expecting affordable units? What are our targets for this money that we're spending?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Riepma. Right at the moment, the intention in terms of targets for the City of Barrie really is the housing pledge and the numbers that the municipality has been given for the next couple of years. So in 2024, it's that number is 1917. So in terms of success and in terms of what staff are hoping to do with the CIP, it really is to get those units built, and that's to try to continue to meet the housing targets issued by the province. Council is aware that additional Building Faster Fund money is tied to those housing starts and foundation start numbers. And so from an intention, that's the piece. So there are definitely, and again, just wanted to flag, this is a housing CIP. So in terms of affordable housing, there's affordable housing targets in the official plan. There's some affordable housing targets in our agreements for the Housing Accelerator Fund. But in terms of the CIP, the intention is to incent all types of housing.
So, just to be clear, we're not targeting affordable housing in this fund.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Rietma, we're not only targeting affordable housing. We're certainly prioritizing it. If council takes a look at the scorecard, that's how projects would get weighted and scored in terms of how closely aligned they are to the council's goals. And so certainly if there are affordable housing units within the project, there are the scores are relevant to that, but we are prioritizing all types of housing.
If I can just follow up. So we don't have a target for affordable housing in this program at all. I mean, you're hoping to get some, but I guess my concern is, we need affordable housing. I mean, we need housing of all kinds, but we need affordable housing. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, I guess I'm concerned that we spend $5 million and what are we going to get in terms of affordable? That's mine.
Mayor Nuttall, through you to Councillor Rietma. So as I said, the Housing Accelerator Fund does have a target for 210 affordable units, and the Housing Accelerator Fund is quite condensed. So the intention would be to have a minimum of 210 affordable new units within the next couple of years because of the way the funding is. So in terms of what staff are working towards, that 210 target is still valid, and presumably some of those units, if not all of them, would be supported through the CIP, but that's kind of the way the targets are set up.
Okay, I guess I'm pleased with that answer in the sense that at least we have a number of units that we're expecting to get by spending the $5 million this year, and who knows what we'll spend next year. I guess I have one other question. Simcoe County is building a building now on, or going to be building shortly on Rose Street. Is that building eligible for this money?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Rietma, yes, absolutely. Staff would expect that the County of Simcoe would be applying for a CIP for that project.
Just one more question. So if we were to give the whole $5.6 million to the County of Simcoe, do we know how many more units of affordable housing would be in that project?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Rietma. So there is already quite a mix of unit types and unit price points and within the 20 Rose Street project, which council will hear more about. It's going to a public meeting on June 12th, and you'll hear a bit more about that. But so it's 215 units altogether. Some of the units are rent geared towards income. Some units are rental at 80% of the average market rate. Some of the units, 99 units, are at 100% of the annual monthly rental rates, and 28 units at 120%. So there is already built into the program or to the project a whole bunch of varying opportunities for different price points. We did look at whether or not additional money might change that flexibility, but at the end of the day, it really actually works out to more like 80% affordable 20% at market. So that's actually a pretty good mix for a project of this size and type.
Yeah, Councillor, we had the Simcoe County Housing meeting after the County Council meeting yesterday. And one of the themes that is continually explored is the cost of a unit through the county's operation versus what we would expect from maybe a private sector builder delivering some of that to market. And so, you know, I'd be nervous about putting all of our eggs in a county basket at this point, until we see what potentially could come back from the private sector or from not-for-profit sector. You know, you see a unit cost of, I think it's $500,000 or $600,000 through the county at Rose Street, and I'm going on memory. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but and I'm hearing from not-for-profits $250,000 a unit. So I would personally, if I was sitting around that, I'm not on that CIP committee, I'd be very nervous to just hand over a check to the county to say, here's all of our money gone, and not necessarily get a whole lot more in terms of the housing stock. The other thing I just want to highlight to everybody is that this isn't the only thing we're doing, right? Like from affordability, we have Vespra. The county said yesterday that they were going to request the City of Barrie to move the portables, for lack of a better word, someone will have a better word for it than me, from Rose Street down to Vespra, and to create a rehousing program there. I don't believe that that's something that we've seen yet, but we should expect it to come forward. And they have a whole bunch of other projects throughout the county that they're working on. When it comes to the CIP, folks, like $10 million is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. We're not going to single-handedly get units built, but if there's, as the prices come into line, hopefully they do, if we can incent some of that to happen quicker, I think that this is great. One of the things that I think we need to be realistic about is that there was $3.5 million, something like that, left over. And that tells me there was $3.5 million not really requested for a project that made a lot of sense. We've increased the number, we've changed the strategy, but if the market just ain't there, we could make it $100 million under the same criteria. It still wouldn't go anywhere. So I think we have to be realistic that the market needs to be in a place where it can take advantage of the CIP in order for it to be effective going forward. If there's any other questions or comments with regards to the amendment from Deputy Mayor Thompson? Okay, see none. All those in favor? It carries. On the amendment, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Courser, after the amendment, you had your hand up to speak to the CIP at large.
Just to follow up on the thread that Councillor Ritma had pulled. So to be clear, the CIP, through its scorecarding system, is prioritizing affordable builds through scorecards, but it's not prioritizing affordable builds completely. Like we're getting a mix, like you said, 80-20 is the goal.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Courser. So the way the scorecard would work is if you actually were doing an affordable project, you would get more points, and then at the end of the day, when you're prioritizing the projects and the dollars, the projects that scored higher would be the ones that would get funded first, and if you kind of ran out of money, I guess, if you will, then again, the projects that were funded first or had the higher scores would be the ones that would be successful. So the idea with the CIP is for people to come to the city with their projects and their applications and how they meet the criteria of the CIP. And that's typically the way it's kind of worked in the past. So it's up to the applicant to come in and say this is why their project meets the criteria. And again, if they have some affordable units within there, then they'll be ranked accordingly.
So if I may, then, of course, this is like a call out to say, hey, we've got assistance for affordable housing, and this is the scoring, and this is how we're going to support that.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, correct. That would be one aspect, as well,
Yep.
purpose-built rental.
Yes.
So if you're purpose-built rental projects, or even some of the bigger tower projects, it's really just a call for all developers and all development projects to come to the table to say, hey, this is our project, and this is how the city could help, because we have heard that it's different for each project.
Mm-hmm. Just my concern is like this with this funding, like you said, is if the nonprofit space is been has been finding challenges over the last few years. If they are not able to come to the table, then this funding could go to high-level condos. Is that correct? If the money's going to go out the door, but if nonprofits, let's say, nonprofits are not able to step up, then this could go to like expensive condos.
So I'm just
No,
going
this is-
to jump in there because there's just a little bit of politics in the sense of the high-level earners. The way that the CIP is structured in terms of the strategy, anybody can apply. So for anything, the reality is that there's a set of criteria that staff have outlined that say, if you're
Yes.
increasing affordability, you get a better score and you have a higher chance of receiving funding. But that doesn't mean if there's a condo tower that's being built on H block, because that's one we talk about a lot, that they wouldn't be able to ask for money in order to receive funding as well. And it's arguable that there would be high cost units inside of that facility as well, and they would be able to apply.
I'll just have to have us asking staff. Thank you.
That's great. So
Okay, so if I may, I've got a couple more questions.
absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so with the report for on the Development Services Housing Bulletin version V 1.1 for the table of affordable rental units, I did a little bit of sketchy math. So for one-person rental is $1,430 a month. $1,430 a month is considered affordable according to the province. A full-time person, a full-time wage, minimum wage, starting October, because minimum wage is going up, is $17.20 an hour. Then it works out to be, after taxes, $2,076 take home. And average price of groceries, and this was a few weeks ago when we had this conversation, was $440 a month for one person. And that is last few weeks ago. It just keeps going up for groceries. So for rent, $1,430, food, $445, and let's throw in a monthly bus pass for $92. That ends up at almost $2,000 a month. That's $1,967. Which leaves $109 a month because utilities are not included. So that would be $109 a month for one adult, for utilities, any insurance, clothing, medicine, or anything that they would possibly need. It's like $25 a week. So, and that's for one person in a one-bedroom apartment. When you do the math further, when you're talking about a single caregiver or parent with one child, or an adult caregiver, or anything along those lines, that's the thought that $1,145, or sorry, one bedroom, I'm mistaken, $1,430 a month for one bedroom. Looking at those numbers, these are just not affordable. And I'm wondering if there is some flexibility with what we consider within the CIP within our city, every city being different. I'm wondering if the flexibility that we have about the proposed rental rates, can we change these rental rates to be a little less for what would be considered affordable for our city? Or is this something that's mandated by the province, or what are the rules around this?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. So two things just off the top. So the way staff are proposing to have that information in the bulletin is intended because previously it was actually in the CIP. So anytime it actually changed, we had to change the whole CIP. So we're putting it, suggesting to put it in a bulletin so there is that flexibility to amend it. I think from time to time, according to the executive director, I think is the wording that that we have in there. So that's initially why we did it the way we did, as opposed to having it in the CIP. And then secondly, staff grabbed the affordable rates as sourced on the bottom of the document, and it is the standard practice of how you use the CMHC data, the area data, to tie not only income, which is obviously what we get as well from census, but to the local market. So there's this term deeply affordable, and so certainly that would work for different income percentiles, and we definitely in the scorecard actually score projects higher if they actually are providing deeply affordable units versus just affordable units. And so that's really how staff would suggest tackling we wouldn't necessarily recommend changing the definition because it is standard, it's industry practice, it is supposed to take into account, as I said, area incomes and area rental or purchase prices. But as I said, definitely there's the ability to rank projects higher if they're offering more deeply affordable units.
Just a follow-up, if I may. I'm probably incorrect on this, but I had thought that there was a hard definition of affordable, which is what we're looking at, but I didn't think there was a hard definition for deeply affordable. I thought that was more of a vague kind of saying, like, as opposed to geared to income or, so does deeply affordable actually have a defined, point to it? Is there a definition of deeply affordable, a mathematical equation?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, it typically means less than the 60%. So if it's less than the 60% income decile, then that's considered deeply affordable.
So it could be $10 less a month, and that would be deeply affordable?
Could just be less than the 60%, correct.
So yeah, that's where I really, this is a real sticking point to me, because like you said, this is to assist people, and affordable is, as we've all said around the table, that affordable really isn't affordable as the definition has been laid out by what has been given by the province. And I am glad that the scoring card is kind of prioritizing things that are better for our community on an affordable sense, but I always have such a hard time with this definition of affordable, because as I outlined, what is affordable? And this is just not affordable. But that's an issue I guess I have with the definition of the term. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Corser. Councillor Rima.
Councillor Corser just reminded me of something that I should have asked. And this is a question also to Ms. Banfield. Is there a provision in our scorecard for rent geared to income? Because I think that's really what Councillor Corser is driving at, is having a rental rate that is geared to income.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, no, there's no rent geared to income proposed. The County of Simcoe in the past has funded some of those types of units. They do tend to be more legacy units in terms of there's not many of them around, and when they cease to exist, they have, I think, in the past kind of gone away, but it's certainly not in this CIP, no.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Is it possible to add rent geared to income to the scorecard?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, I suppose, sorry, Councillor Reid, my apologies. I I suppose we could. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the scorecard is about trying to get projects that actually, so we could add it in, but I don't think that it's going to necessarily make rent geared towards income units just come out of the woodwork, I guess, it still ties to the fact that projects have to be viable and have good business cases. And in fact, that's kind of one of the elements as well for the CIP is asking for some of those business cases from the applicants as well to see how the project itself looks.
Okay, I'll leave it there. We have another week before council. I may have something to put together on that.
Yeah, Councilor Rima, one of the questions I asked yesterday at the Affordable Housing, Simcoe County Housing, was if there had been any input to our CIP by them to try to get more dollars for things like this. They had said that they'd given their feedback. Was that something that they have asked for? And if not them, are there others that have requested rent geared to income funding?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, I'm glad that was the answer, because I'm like, I know we have spoken to the county about the CIP, and no, I mean, even from the rent geared toward income program, the county makes up the difference. Like, that's kind of how the program, and so no, the county didn't ask us to consider that, and that's not, as I said, I don't think a program. I think the county is looking for other programs, and they're keeping the units that exist, but it really is an old, like, it is a legacy program even at the county level.
Is there any way that you could provide to us what the feedback is for Councilor Rietma from our county friends, as they are the, not tonight, it can be this week, they are the manager of all things social services. And it would be interesting, I think, for council to know what the professionals who are running these programs on our behalf are communicating to us with regards to this policy. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Awesome. I'm going to go to Councilor Negussi, then Councilor Harvey. Councilor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Ms. Banfield, just a clarification. I know I sent you some email regarding this agenda. So for those who are building affordable houses in 2024 are eligible for this program.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Negussi. So the intention is for people that are building in 2024 will get the $2024, correct?
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just kind of to take off what Councillor Rietma and Councillor Corser were talking about. I know it's been quite some time since we've seen any co-op housing being built in the city. Has there been any recent interest by anybody coming forward when it comes to co-op housing? Because I think that's going to be really one of our key pieces to be able to get into this affordability piece. To Councillor Corser's point about rent geared to income and being able to keep the units as is, opposed to sometimes losing that because they get sold. Will this CIP, just because it is a very complex report with multiple attachments, just to get some clarity, if somebody was to come forward with a co-op housing project, would this CIP provide them with the appropriate resources when it comes to this DCs and stuff?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, absolutely. There's nothing that really, a co-op housing is really more of a funding model and a tenure model and how it operates. And there certainly wouldn't be anything that would preclude a co-op project from applying and most likely being successful. I can tell you, though, from a staff level, we haven't had in recent memory a co-op type discussion or project or proposal kind of come through our doors. But if there were, for sure, they could apply.
Great, thank you. Yeah, because I think the last one that I'm aware of would be the one in Allendale, and that's got to be 30 plus years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. It's also want to remind everyone the Coral is proceeding, finally, And it has nothing to do with our CIP, as I understand.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, it was through the previous CIP.
Through the, right. And the provincial government, right? Because I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts, there's more dollars saved through no DCs whatsoever than there is through our CIP. And so I want to make that point because cross-market, we can do very little with $10 million on billions of dollars of development that's going to take place. And one of the requests we approved previously was to ask the province with regards to the ability to waive DCs in other circumstances other than just affordable housing, which we haven't been given, which would be a different tool, another time. But there is a good piece of news here that between the two projects, for over 250 new units of affordable housing coming online. And there's the building that was built by Melchior Management on Bayfield Street, which I think is 30 units or so. I can't think of another affordable housing development that's happened like in the past decade. Was one on Penetang, was that? So there are actually investments being made and there are units coming to market, but 250 units on 7,000 people on a wait list is very little. Deputy Mayor, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. This is more of a comment. So, I couldn't agree more with Councillor Harvey about the report and a ton of attachments, and I just wanted to thank staff. This is big time. And the education sessions that your staff put on was very helpful. And look, we're trying to build houses faster. We throw lots of spaghetti against the wall and hope some of it sticks. And, there's no crystal balls of what program will work best. But we've taken a lot, there were some of my concerns with, we've offered too much in the CIP and there's not a lot of money and it gets watered down. But understanding we don't know what's going to be ready, it's all about accelerating building. And sometimes it's not the greatest thing that can get built, it's what can get built today. And that's some of our problem, that we just can't get shovels in the ground fast enough. So I wanted to thank staff because it was a very extensive report and there was lots of work gone into this, and the time that they spent with council and stuff was extremely helpful. So thank you.
All right. All those in favor of the CIP, and it's approved. Councillor Ritma, the 2023 Budget and Business Plan Year-End Report is yours. If you could put the motion on the floor, and then any amendments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I held it and I'll put it on the floor as printed, and I have an amendment. And the amendment is to add a paragraph that staff make a presentation to Finance and Responsible Governance Committee regarding the status of reserve funds with recommendations to bring the tax-funded reserve levels to the provincial average and to bring the tax capital reserve into conformity with the city's financial policy framework in the fall of 2024. And I can speak to that.
Just to clarify, is that to bring it into conformity in fall of 2024?
No,
or is
to
that
bring
for
the report
back?
Yes.
For 2024, perfect. Because that would be a lot of work.
Frankly, I'd really like to have it come into conformity by 2024, but
I all of a sudden don't want to be in charge of the budget.
yeah, I know. Mr. Mayor, if you read, and I'm sure you all have read this report, and paragraphs 58, 60, and 63 cause me a great deal of heartburn, and I'm sure that is the case around the table as well. Those paragraphs basically say that our DC reserves, our tax capital reserve are underwater, and our tax-funded reserves are below comparable with other municipalities. So I don't have any problem receiving the report. I think we need to do that. But I think we are being presented with a problem. And I think we need to spend some time and get some good advice from our financial folks to figure out how we right that piece of the ship. And so that's the reason behind my amendment. And I'm asking for support on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for the hold and the amendment. I think that we do have a lot of work to do on this front. I know Craig today and every day is nervous about these items in the medium term. I believe we have some pain in the latter 20s and the amount expected in terms of capital investment versus what we have or we have on the plate to tax for. I will remind council that we have made some very solid moves on this front as well, in the sense that we increased the capital portion of our tax to 2% from 1%. And I believe that the average it was actually instituted at and implemented at over the previous number of years was in the neighborhood of 0.5%. So there's four times more dollars going into hard infrastructure spending going forward, but that doesn't solve the problem by itself. There's a ton of project management in the sense of not the implementation of the project, but managing the projects that need to take place over the next little while. And thank you for holding that, and I was very pleased to hear that you were running with that today. So I think it was a very good catch and good work. And you're creating lots more work for our public servants. So that's fun too. We'll now, I didn't see any other questions or comments, so we'll call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? It carries. All those in favor of the main motion? Sorry, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'm just sending everybody right now. I'm going to move a quick amendment. This amendment came in light of the presentation that we had from Carnival Barrie. If people remember, I think it was in February, that we had Carnival Barrie come and present to us about the Latin Festival that they put together last year. So regarding that, I touched base with staff shortly after that meeting, and they told me that the appropriate time would be during this report, and this report obviously has been delayed for a bit, so here we are. And the amendment is as follows. Everybody has it in their email. The $5,000 from the 2023 year-end tax surplus being allocated to the tax rate stabilization reserve be paid to Carnival Barrie for their festival planned on Barrie's waterfront on Saturday, August 31st and Sunday, September 1st, 2024, subject to event permits successfully being issued by the city. And then also that Carnival Barrie provide an event impact report to Barrie City Council before March 2025 regarding their 2024 festival in the form of a slide deck or memo submitted to the city clerk. And I can speak to that, Mayor Nuttall.
The floor is yours, sir.
Pretty self-explanatory. I'll start from the bottom. Event impact report, KPIs are great, and I think they did a really good job at summarizing the impact that they had. So event impact report, don't know if that's a lingo, but it sounds great. And submit to city clerk, that way there's flexibility. That way they know who to send it to, and city clerk can share it with the relevant staff groups. They have a good amount of time to submit that as well. And then also, I just want to clarify on why the $5,000 and where it's coming from. At that last meeting a couple months ago, but it's been a while, so I'll refresh. We got a $5,000 community contribution from Honeywell Communities, Mayor Nuttall, as you know, and that following the proper guidelines and protocols, that check was given to the city treasurer. And even though the president of Honeyfield Community said that it was almost like a thank you, Ward 9, for welcoming us to Barrie, but specifically to Ward 9, this should go to Ward 9 community initiatives. And I told them, hey, can you earmark it? Makes my job easier when you earmark it. And they said, nope, it's up to you. It's up to you. And I touched base with Mr. Marlar, and I'm not able to formally earmark it to a Ward 9 initiative. It has to go to the general coffers, and then council has to make a decision. But I do feel comfortable. I'm not going against the Honeyfield's wishes, but I do feel comfortable letting this benefit all residents of Barrie and not make it a Ward 9 thing. So I guess I'll just, through you, Mayor Nuttall, very quickly hand off the floor. I guess ask Mr. Miller in the form of a question. Can you confirm the events that I've outlined and add any color as you think is appropriate?
Yes, through you, Mayor Nuttall. So we did receive a donation check of $5,000, just as Councilor Morales described. That was back in, I think, October, November 2023, give or take. So that money is deposited. It is part of the year-end surplus number. We never got any direction on how to spend that money. So everything he said is true and legit. So.
Always makes me happy when staff say everything I say is true and legit. So there we go. That's basically it. I said that at the meeting that I'd take a look into this and go from there. And members of council will note, so two things, the event impact report, again, KPIs are good. And I also put upon issuance of event permits. Many things happen and yep, okay, perfect. So I just want to make sure that that is clear and there's good support for the organization.
Thank you, Councilor Morales. It was a great event last summer. I'm sure it's going to be a great one this summer. Any other questions or comments with regards to Councilor Morales' amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. On the main motion, any more comments or questions? Seeing none, I see those urged or quick to vote. It's twice Councilor Kungol's put up her hand. All those in favor? It carries. We're going to now move on to Councilor Kungol with REC 001-24 Recreation and Sport Community Grant Adjudication Process. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I want to may put the motion on the floor as presented, but I'm going to speak to it and then I may have an amendment. I really love that we've got dedicated grants. I understand the interest in changing some of the composition, but I guess my concerns are I see this as an opportunity for us to really look at how we can be hands-in on the framework, the criteria, the policy, the final approval, but that the panel is citizen-led, that it's citizens being not elected officials. And one piece in particular is I'd really love to see, because I think the next motion talks about another type of composition, a view of all the different grant monies. How could we potentially look at that from a pooling? Because I still firmly believe, and we've heard even earlier tonight, Shaq's World coming together for funding. Some organizations just don't seem to fit in some categories or criteria. So while the motion is focused on a change of composition of the panel, I would really love to either add a section that directs staff to look at one that's operating in Guelph, and I'll talk a little bit about what I see as the merits of that. I want to share that context because I really struggle with supporting a movement to council members becoming the committee. And I think if that does happen, at least that's an interim measure, because I know the context of that conversation and wanting to happen soon is so that the next intake process has the committee in place. But for 2025, and whether this is a movement towards Mayor's Task Force or coming back to Finance and Governance, my intention is to ask Council to consider looking at Guelph. So City of Guelph actually last year, I think, gave $365,000 with some other considerations, and in particular, have very clear alignment to strategic directions, KPIs, and other components. They also have a very interesting policy. I'm not sure if we do tie to this, but also an evaluation. And so while we get a report to say who got this, who applied, and who received it, I think there's a whole different reporting structure. So I'd almost love a fulsome review to say, how do we actually explore the merits of what Guelph is doing? I believe that is a citizen panel, but through the criteria, I would say, let's set the criteria, let's be hands-in on those pieces, hands out when it comes to identifying recommendations for who receives the funding. In their process, the decisions are made by their respective Deputy CAO of Public Services based on recommendations. Council still does the budget approval. Finance Department, has its role in that. But I also like to think that there are some pieces that also have, financial control from a sound audit when we're giving this kind of money out. I believe that does happen here. But I would really love to see consideration of really looking at overall an evaluation of how they're running. I think it's great that we're still committed to this. But in particular, we know people are still trying to find their way to councils to pitch us for funding. That whether we believe there's other revenue options, there are still groups that feel like there are gaps in being seen as part of the criteria. We have had many that I'm aware of receive significant capital dollars, which is great, but where does that come at a cost for other programs for startup? There are multi-year funding opportunities in that program. So for me, I think there's just naturally, maybe it's time to do a broader scope of, do we just pull all of our grant funding together and we look at the merits of this? So if council's proceeding for a structure, I would just say, I really hesitate to support it. I'm not aligned to replacing staff with council, and that just ending there. So I want to preface it to say, if that happens, I don't want that to come in place of us actually taking a fuller review and starting with Guelph and looking at perhaps staff coming back and proposing a structure to us to say, here's another way in which we could look at resident engagement with us taking more of a hands-off administrative approach as members of council. Happy to elaborate further, but struggle to support it as is.
And the other grants that you're saying to bring in are?
I think it would be nice to even, so I don't want to throw necessarily an amendment on the table here, because it would be nice to ask staff to say, what are all the other pools of grants that we have? Because I think we've got arts, we've got the sport and rec, there's other committees I think that have some discretion on dollars. But what would it look like if we just pooled all of our grants together and opened up the criteria? Because we know some concerns, I would even love the feedback. Individuals that have asked for grant funding, I don't believe are eligible if they ask for any staff support or administrative support, yet we're doing heavy capital. But some of our grassroots organizations just can't do it because they're volunteer run. So where do we maybe have an opportunity to even evaluate, where are we putting barriers on individuals doing really great work because of how we see them being able to handle the dollars?
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rittman, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do see merit in that suggestion in terms of looking at the bigger picture. But just focusing on this recommendation and the next one, I'm reluctant to support them simply because I think that as council, our job is to steer the boat and not row the boat. And I think that this is getting into rowing, and I really am reluctant to get involved in the administrative part of a policy. It's up to us to set the policy, but not to implement the policy, and this is very much implementing. Now, if we believe that implementation is not being done well, or needs to be reinforced, then I think, fine, give us some suggestions. If we need some program or topic expert to evaluate these grant applications, I'm quite happy to add that into the adjudication mix. But I certainly don't think that I'm an expert in those areas, and I think we have staff on board already that know a lot about what the community needs and what the individual organizations need and how to evaluate them. So I'm very reluctant to get involved in that, and I don't think we should do it.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just looking at the current composition also, I struggle with a couple of the positions to really understand the rationale as to why they would be there. Like I see there's a representative from the finance department. Well, someone from the finance department I wouldn't suspect is going to be, obviously from the finance be well-versed, but not from the sport and cultural side of it. And then also too, like, I fully understand why the Director of Recreation and Culture Services is there, but really struggle to understand why the GM of Community and Corporate Services would need to be there from an EMT level. So I guess first I'll put it to Mr. Miller as to why someone from finance would be well suited to be there, and then I guess I'll move the other one over to the CAO for that. But I just struggle with those two positions. I just think we're double tapping in the one end, and then I'm not so sure how finance really fits into this, other than obviously we're giving money away.
So through you, Mayor Nuttall, I'll just say that we in the Finance Department are very athletic and culture diverse folks. I think the intent was more on the, and I'll even let Dan maybe jump in as to why finance. I think it was more on the managing of the monies, the cash available, is it counted, that sort of thing. But I'll let Dan explain that one.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. In fact, the last adjudication panel had a representative from Development Services and Parks Planning in lieu of finance to support the adjudication of the grant funding.
Okay, I'll leave it at that, and I'll take it offline, but I think even some of the composition we could potentially revisit. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this?
I guess it would just be that while we're motioning on this, if there's any opinions or views about a broader evaluation, so regardless of, you know, what's I think being told is just a full wipe and replacement, is then an appetite to actually look at how do we review the program overall, criteria, access, reporting, even with a new composition. So I think there's elements just in as we're giving out money, when was the last time that's been reviewed, and even if it comes to a new group, that's somewhere in kind of the process step.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Corser, go ahead.
I really like the sound of Councillor Kungol's motion. It kind of trumps a lot of things I was going to ask. But I would like to ask regarding the makeup of the adjudication committee. Going through the report, I've seen it mentioned multiple times that the arm's length of this committee, the adjudication committee, and it refers to the knowledge and expertise the group making the decisions. So in these meetings, can you give me an example? I know this is kind of throwing it out there, but could you give me an example of maybe an imaginary procurement grant that you might submit that maybe would be inside knowledge of, like, maybe sports fields, or something that would not be top of mind of council, that would have the information to be able to just be able to make those decisions? Maybe maybe I won't be asking that because that's a tough one on the spot. I apologize. But I could see throughout the report, it states that using the knowledge and expertise the adjudication committee has, identifying funding priorities and determine the allocation of the funds. And it's been mentioned, like I said, several times about the knowledge and expertise of the makeup of the adjudication committee, and also the arm's length of it to make sure it's a fair and equitable process. I'm not in favor of having this completely replaced by elected officials, because I'm concerned about the greasy wheel gets the loud wheel gets the grease, and maybe some priorities might be misconstrued because we don't know all the insights and complexities of the different departments and the ongoing relationships with the city and the intricacies of it all, that maybe the knowledge and expertise that staff have and other members of the community have, that they can bring to the table in this, and the history that's involved. I wanted to ask, what brought this forward? How was this, what sparked this report? I guess I'd be asking it through you.
Mr. CEO.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. I think this program and the other program have been returned to General Committee to get additional direction. The I've lost the name of the other program, the Brighton Barrie program, I apologize, and both the sports recreation program, which has certainly been around longer, but still only a couple of years. What staff have noticed over the last couple of years is invariably we don't have enough funding in the envelope. We end up with community groups that are, disappointed, either because they didn't get enough money, or perhaps they got no money because they didn't qualify. Oftentimes their recourse is to contact elected officials and plead their case. Elected officials then feel compelled to, if not intervene, to inquire. And you are immediately breaking the arm's length process. So staff are finding that that is creating an inherent conflict. So the suggestion was that we would return these two programs to council and allow council to provide us with additional direction, either status quo, a new format, a different program, or alternative program. So that really is the genesis of it.
And if I may follow up on that, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Prowse, judgment call, I guess. You're a wise man. Do you feel that if this committee was made up of third-party citizens or outside of the actual staff and council, would that, do you feel, alleviate the backlash, if you will, if it's being out of both of our kind of both of our decision-making? Would that third-party disconnection, would that make, do you feel that that might mitigate some of the backlash that is being felt by, or the angst of some of these people that do not get the funding, that come back and follow up?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corsa, just for clarity, backlash, I think, is your term, not mine.
I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I apologize.
I would, as I try to do, I would advise council that, this is not a unique situation. Council just passed $5,000 for a small cultural group that falls outside whatever umbrella exists today. There's always going to be more needs than there are resources. The cultural grant program, which has been around many, many years now, is third-party adjudicators who specialize in the field, would be considered experts, are compensated for their time, and we still get inquiries, I'll call them inquiries, about those awards. Are they fair? How were they determined? That type of thing is inherent, I think, when local government is distributing funds. So the reality is, I'm not sure it's going to solve any of those concerns for people who feel they've fallen outside of the program. I think staff's thought was that if there is concern about how staff are adjudicating the program, then the appropriate default would probably be the elected officials. Now, if the elected officials decide on something else, then that certainly is within your purview.
Okay, thank you for that. A lot to chew over. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Given the conversation back and forth here, I do have an amendment. I don't have it written down, so I will speak slowly to give the clerk time. So to replace paragraph 1, so still that the composition of the adjudication panel for the Recreation and Sport Community Grant be amended to replace the current adjudication panel composition with the Director of Recreation and Culture Services, a representative from the Economic and Creative Development, a representative from Tourism Barrie, and no more than 2 members of council, and to delete paragraph 2. And I can speak to that if needed, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think it's important that if there is a flavor around the table to want to have some council representation, I'm fine with that, but I think we have to make sure that we still have the key pieces and the key professionals in place to be able to provide the appropriate advice around the table when the decisions are being made. And those are the three key that I see out of the 5 that were from the previous panel, and I don't think it's wise to really make the panel much larger than 5. So that's my rationale.
Councillor Riepma?
Mr. Mayor, and I understand what Councillor Harvey is trying to do, but I don't think it's the right thing to do to mix councillors with staff and give each of them a voting right. I think it sets up a dynamic that is unhealthy and unwise. So I can't support that. I'm certainly open to other suggestions in terms of who might be on that committee, but it certainly shouldn't be a mix of staff and councillors.
Yeah, thank you. Just in response to Councillor Riepma, I appreciate what he's saying, but the reality of it is staff still outnumber the number of councillors. So those 2 councillors are not going to have enough sway to be able to move the needle on any of the applications coming in. And the other 3 that are at the table still outnumber them. So council doesn't have the pull at the table still, and that's why I specifically had it to no more than 2. But again, that's kind of debatable. I'm not a huge fan of having council there myself, but I'm just reading the table here, and this was kind of a middle ground that I could see, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in because I think we're going into a lot of different directions here. I don't think I've even looked at what the Recreation and Sport Community Grant adjudication process has funded in the past. I just don't have an idea of what it's done or hasn't done. The same is not true for the next one. And they are, to me, totally different animals. And that's why they're under different reports. One is actually a federally funded guns and gangs program. And the other one is, how do we distribute the money for recreation activities and sports activities, I guess, in the community? I really don't want to make that decision, and I hope that no one else wants to sit and make that decision, because if you do, you're going to deal with the same thing that staff are dealing with, except instead of being able to go to staff and say why, you're going to have to go find a mirror, and that's an uncomfortable conversation. I don't, and I rarely disagree with our CAO, who I think is doing an incredible job, by the way, in public. I don't think us asking them why is a breach of like the arm's lengthness. I think it's a necessary thing. We need to know why. I think that when there is a request to undo a thing, that's probably a breach of the arm's lengthness. And that shouldn't happen. And so as I look at this, we got 3 options. We either kick it back to members of staff, and you pick, Councillor Harvey's put 3 there already, and say that's the thing, that's the group. You accept that it's going to be members of council, and I won't show up to that committee meeting because I'm an ex officio on it. Or we go out and we get a citizen group to do it, but that not individuals that have a conflict inside of the requests that are being made. Because we don't want like deal making around a table, well, if you support my group, I'll support yours. So a mix of those things, I think, will get us in trouble. There's multiple hands. I'm going to go Councillor Kungl, Councillor Negussi, and...
quickly, I guess, to wrap it up, which is, thank you, Councillor Harvey, for putting something on the table. I heard you saying, don't really support members of council anyway, so I'm not apt to support any member of council on it, so I think I'll share that. I'll let that proceed because you put it on the floor. My interest is probably leaving it status quo. What's the rush? And putting an amendment on the floor that we scrap it and actually first go to exploring Guelph and bring that back as an alternative structure, and we can consider this grant and the composition more fully.
Councillor Negussi, then Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just a friendly amendment. Can you add, instead of 2 councillor, can we put a community members in replacing the member of the council?
I would definitely take that as a friendly, because I'll be quite honest with you, I only had the 2 councillors in there to kind of go middle ground from where the staff report was to where I could see the conversation going, but definitely I would take that as a friendly.
CEO Proust, is there any input you have on 3 members of staff and a couple of members of the community?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. To members of committee, I mean, if I was picking, I would much rather staff be mixed with the public than the inherent sort of power dynamic with members of council and staff. So if that's the Sophie's choice, I'll take members of the community and staff.
I think you just chose 160,000 people ahead of the 11 in front of you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just to follow up on that, I guess, what would obviously putting it out for people to apply is no issue, but I guess one piece that I could see being a concern would be then those 2 members, depending on what application's coming in, being in conflict and obviously ensuring that they are declaring a conflict when they would have those issues arising, and to make sure that they are well versed in our conflict of interest, because I know when I've been on other boards and stuff, sometimes people really don't understand when they are and are not in conflict, and sometimes fly under the radar. And I just don't want to see that we run into issues down the road either, where they voted on something and it turns out they've got a tie to that one organization that has applied.
And I think that's every committee and every, we have a code of conduct that needs to manage that. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Seeing a pattern tonight, when I talk less, I have better brainstorming ideas. So I think I'm gonna bring it home. You're trying not to laugh. For those watching at home, I think I'm gonna bring it home with all the feedback that everyone's been given. I think this is the final nail. Ms. Cook, from a legislative perspective, not from a should we, but are we able to put a call out for membership and that says that eligibility only applies to non-residents, to residents who are not residents of City of Barrie, Springwater, Innisfil, or Medonte, ideally, essentially soliciting, and maybe we don't get applications, but getting essentially impact from residents that I would call live outside the 40-kilometer radius. Are we able to do that from a legislative perspective? And I'll explain my idea why, depending on the answer.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales, that would be, we would probably want that included in any direction that is provided by council. And I might ask Dan to jump in because it's Rec and Cultures Committee, but there's nothing legislatively that says the person, like the committee members have to live in Barrie, but this is like, is this going to be like established as like a committee of council? Obviously, I'm not sure what the process will be, or is it going to be similar to the anti-racism task force that's administered separately and outside of the council process?
Okay.
So it would just, there's nothing legislatively that says a person has to live in Barrie.
Okay, perfect.
But we do have like our policy for our other committees, like our statutory committees and our non-statutory committees, that really says that the people have to, like the members have to be residents of Barrie.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Cook. I'm hearing some flexibility. Mayor Nuttall, here's where I'm going with this. Our investment board that manages our investments, a lot of that is merit-based. Some of it is, what do you bring to the table, which is still merit-based. Some of it is equity, et cetera. So I see the merit of this committee to achieve all the outcomes that all my colleagues have said. The merit is being not as minimally biased as possible. We're all biased, we're all human, but as minimally biased as possible. And what is one of the best ways to achieve that? Having someone that doesn't have a stake in the local stakeholders and the dynamics. Now, will that be all the time achieved? No. But if we get people from the York region, we get people from like North Simcoe, and I'm not limiting it to anybody. If we get applications there, they can make a very objective and specifically merit-based, and they have the qualifications to maybe interpret and make those decisions instead of being like, oh, I don't know why I'm making this decision, who's putting up their hand, who do I ask? Like, we're getting, just the way we got merit-based people with industry experience for our investment board. So, and that would remove any, or severely reduce any chances that we get biases. So I'm wondering if we can do exactly what everyone said, the two of you kind of put forward, and just say that we're soliciting from non-Barrie residents. And for the purpose of that, I include Innisfil, I include Ormondonte, I include Springwater, and I possibly include Essa Township as well, because lots of our Barrie residents, commute, they live 20 minutes out of town. Could that be an issue in soliciting applications? Possibly, but I do know that there's some cross-pollination, if you will, between people who live, say, in Vaughan and volunteer on a theater board in Mississauga.
Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just one point of clarity, actually, from a point that the clerk brought up, and through you to the CAO to see what his recommendation would be on this. Would you recommend that this be a committee of council, or that this just be something totally separated from council, so that way even the selection of those two civilian members would not come to this council?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, based on the discussion, Councillor Harvey, I don't believe it doesn't sound like you need to make it a committee of council. Mr. Bell's team could still continue to run the program, but instead of it all being staff members, the suggestion I think was to introduce two members from the community, which Mr. Bell's team could develop some criteria. I think he had sort of opined about perhaps a member of the Barrie Sports Hall of Fame or something like that. Invite some members in from the community to give a little more balance. It doesn't need to be a committee of council, which certainly adds a level of complexity to it. So based on what I've heard, I would say leave it housed where it is, which is in recreation and culture, and perhaps we can establish some criteria on those community invitees that we could bring in.
Great, thank you. That's exactly the answer I was hoping to hear.
May I very quickly, I just want to ask, we've had a request, not a motion, okay, not an amendment. We've had a request to look at the way somewhere else does it, right? And a global fund, if you will, from all the funds that are out there. Could we, by any chance, Mr. Bell, get just like a quick half-pager this week describing what that is from what they're doing in Guelph, just so the rest, you have information the rest of us don't, and so if we or flip it around, then we can all be on the same page for next week, because maybe there is just some better model that's out there. Councillor Hamilton, you had your hand up.
Thank you, through you. It's probably redundant at this point because what you've said is kind of where I'm going. I think we've complicated this quite a bit in my sense. Like, this should not come to council. It's very operational. I don't see a role for council in this. I completely understand where staff's coming from. It's a community-based program. I think there needs to be community input. I would have one staff member, 4 community members. Would love to hear about Guelph. I actually think the whole process of the grants needs to be relooked at, but in terms of the adjudication process, I don't know why we need to have it heavy with staff, and I certainly don't see a need or desire for council to be involved in a very operational activity. So my 2 cents for what it's worth, but I'm happy to receive information about Guelph, and I'm happy to hear more public representatives, community representatives too. For me, I feel like having 3 staff and 2 community members is I don't know. I don't actually think that's doing it justice. I think this is a community-based program. It should be majority community and 1 staff member to oversee it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Horser.
Yeah, and just to quickly add that I don't think we need to go outside of Barrie. Barrie's a big city. I think we can find lots of people that are well qualified and do not have an actual conflict. I think that we don't need to reach outside, like, think of any retired school principal, or there's lots of people that would be, just a thought, it's late, anyone, we don't need to go outside the city, I don't think.
Okay, so the motion I have on the floor that was a friendly amendment from Councillor Ngusi to Councillor Harvey is asking for 3 members of staff and 2 members from the public, and that request be conducted by the clerk's office to find those two individuals through Mr. Bell's, with Mr. Bell there, and report back to council through memo, I think is sufficient. I'm not sure I need another report back on this. I don't know if anyone else does, but I don't think I do. So that's what's on the floor, and I will call the vote on that. All those in favor? It carries. Those against? Okay. And so I think there'll be more information provided between this week and last week. We got to go on the main motion now as amended. Deputy Mayor Thompson?
It's more of a comment after the amendment and now the motion's amended. The only thing I would ask is that the members of public have no affiliation. If you belong to an organization or in any indirect way, you cannot be part of the selection panel. I know that we've had some issues with people that work for organizations then lobby for, so that would be my only stipulation.
Yeah, if we can just maybe in our memo back outline what that is, because if you have no affiliation with sports or recreation, it's going to be difficult to be right? You're saying with an organization that's actively seeking it. Yeah. So if we can just have that verbiage worked out on the way back in, I think that would be helpful.
I'm really sorry, but I think I got confused in what you put forward, what the vote was on. It was on the amendment as Councillor Harvey put forward? As
friendly amended by Councillor Ngusi for 2 members of the public and 3 members of staff.
Right, so I did not vote for that. So it's still carried? Because I think you included me in that vote.
Still carried, yep.
Okay.
So on the main motion as amended, are there any other comments or questions?
Just one, could you clarify that? Because I believe that then includes members of council being added, or overall?
No
Okay.
members of council, 2 members of the public, 3 members of staff, and there'll be a memo back identifying which, and it's got to go through council next week.
I do have an amendment, but do you want me to wait till we motion on this to then add it in?
Sorry, could you?
So I guess it would be now?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to add paragraph 4, that staff examine the City of Guelph community grant process, which utilizes a citizen panel, and bring forward considerations for the structure of this committee.
So I think we're kind of putting 2 separate directions on the same motion, if that's, and I'm not sure I can rule that in order. So it wouldn't be a 4, it would be completely amending it to that staff go and figure out how to emulate what's happening in Guelph.
If I can clarify, if it helps.
Yep.
So the amendment, if it puts 2025 on it, because I know you want the 2024 process, but I'd still like staff to then bring back, if we support this modified structure, I still think there's merit in exploring what others are doing and how to grow more of a contingent of residents in that panel and differentiate maybe the roles of staff in decision-making and the framework and criteria versus a panel that might be larger that has more resident engagement. So I don't see it as replacing, but a process.
So if you're saying that that as an interim process, so an amendment to paragraph 1 would be that as an interim process, what's been amended and adopted. Paragraph 4, that in the longer view, staff report back on
The evolution of the current structure and process
Then I could-
after looking at Guelph as an example.
I can accept that.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments with regards to the request for staff to investigate what Guelph does or other models that are out there? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, it carries. On the main motion, now twice amended, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, it carries. And we will move to the final held by Councillor Corser. Councillor Corser.
I'd like to put the motion on the floor as amended. As printed, amended. It's got a conversation going on here. I think a lot of the conversation actually, as covered in what we were just discussing with the Recreation and Sport Community Grant adjudication process. And I might be confusing this. Somebody please help me. Was this report was to change the panel? Yes, it was amended to include 5 members of the Community Safety Committee. So basically, it was the same as the previous, that we're putting the full complement of the Adjudication Committee being the Community Safety Committee. That was full council, right? Councillors that was going to be on this Adjudication Committee. And I have the kind of like the I'm uncomfortable with this because of the exact same reason. It just doesn't feel that this being, like you said, for more of a specialized portion of our community, I thought that it would be best that it would have a makeup of an adjudication committee that would be more experienced or more involved in that. Could make better decisions than maybe some of us being laymen would. So I just wanted to maybe change the amend. To leave as the makeup as it is now, or to reach out to the public with maybe experts in the field to replace some of our staff members if it's overweighted with staff, like the last conversation. But I think it would be more of a finicky pick for who would be sitting on it. I just wanted to open this up as conversation because I'd like to see this not be left just to elected officials to make those decisions.
Deputy Mayor Thompson, then Councillor Reba.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So this one to me is a lot different. This is federal grant money with a purpose of gangs and guns, community safety stuff, which we all are responsible for. We get hounded by it. We get emails about it. And I think this is where council can control the best bang for the buck. When we get grant funding for a purpose, I can support this one wholeheartedly with the composite changing with community safety well-being members. And if somebody wanted to move, some community partners of similar to the community and safety well-being plan, I would accept that too. But I think this has a purpose where the money should be directed. And I can support council having, as we own this. So that's my thoughts.
Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments are going to be exactly the same as the previous one, so I just say ditto. I don't, again, yes, it has a purpose, but at the same time, and of course, as councillors, we wear it, but we've set it up. It's a program that is being run by the city, and I think we should just leave it alone and let staff make those kind of calls. I don't think we should be doing that operational kind of work.
So I'll be really, really honest right here. I had a big problem with where a couple of the funding items went last time because I know about this funding model from time of being a member of Parliament and the focus on guns and gangs and how to influence young people who are in very at-risk situations to choose the best path going forward. Like, when I get a call, or let's say it's not me and I'm not around, or Deputy Mayor Robert Thompson gets a call from the Minister of Public Safety asking about the funding we chose to give out, which we didn't choose to give out, and could we please substantiate how we decided to do so, I can tell you that my conversation with my Chief Administrative Officer, our Chief Administrative Officer, and with Deputy Mayor Thompson was, I can't. I found it very difficult. I asked for, and after I think everybody received it, I asked for some context behind the decision-making process. And I think that one of the most difficult pieces of this was actually that the City of Barrie is actually best positioned. Like, so one of the times that we are thinking that young people are going to be in difficult situations, like let's think about the summertime, right? You know, those with means, most of their kids are going into camps, right? I always tell people that the local park is the summer camp for the kids in government housing, because it is. And I think that we had some missed opportunities to be able to provide free camps, free access to at-risk children and youth in our community. With this funding, I feel that we were actually, as a city, best positioned, but we had a little bit of a conflict of interest inside of our own team that made the decisions on where the money should go and how it should be spent. If you can think about, I don't know what the ratio is. I'm going to pretend it's, you know, my kids go into the City of Barrie summer camps, and I'm guessing it's 5 or 6 or 7 to 1 per counselor. Mr. Bell, you might know, you might not. Somewhere in there. And each one of those students costs us, I don't know, $4,000 a summer because of the amount that's subsidized by the student program. And so for $20,000, you end up with 20 to 30 kids every week for a summer having an incredible program, because Mr. Bell, you run incredible programming with your team through our rec services program. The value I think we missed on this last run. I think that we undervalued how impactful our recreation teams are, specifically during the summer, March break, those times where we don't want our young people just sitting around doing nothing with no supervision and unable to be accessing the services that we want them to have. So I was critical, and that critique stands. I have no problem defending it. I'm not sure, and again, that throwing it at council members is the right decision, but I was really critical. So I'd probably be more comfortable. I think it's more objective for us, because these dollars, I believe the city does run these programs, and in competition with others that run the programs. Perhaps it would be easier for staff if it wasn't staff, because they could then apply for that funding without being the same people that are hitting the approve button at the same time, to be able to deliver those services. And this is big money. How much was the last amount that went out?
Approximately $700,000 there now.
$700,000 on the last go round, and there's another $550 or some odd.
I understand there's one more intake for probably somewhere in the order of $600,000, maybe?
$400,000. So that's the grapple on this one for me. On the previous one, I didn't feel this way. On this one, I feel like we've got to come up with something different, because I believe that our team, because of the value we add, are best suited. But I also wouldn't be able to defend a call from the minister saying, why'd you guys give yourselves all the money, and who were the adjudicators that were different from people that were asking for it? So I think there's inherently an issue that we need to figure out. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, and through you, I appreciate your input and insight, and I agree with a lot of what you said. I feel differently in some respects that I still feel like it's a community fund, no matter where the funding has come from, and it needs to have community input or involvement. And I hear the conflict with staff being involved in it. So again, my thought process on this would be then you have 1 or 2 councillors and the majority of community members. But I think more alarming for me is what you pointed out. It's not who's deciding, but it's the process in which that decisions are getting made. And if the minister's calling you and we're unable to say, we're not really sure, I mean, that's not an issue with people, it's an issue with process. For me, there needs to be a
Sorry,
very...
the minister didn't actually call me.
Well, no, I'm saying if the minister ever called you, it doesn't matter if they're calling you or me or staff or whoever. We should have a very clear process identified. We should have a very clear decision-making framework that is utilized, whether it's staff on the panel, whether it's us on the panel, whether it's community members on the panel. There needs to be a very consistent approach. So again, I don't know how it's been done. I don't know what decision-making framework or tool has been used in the past, but to me, it looks like we might actually need to look at the process of how we evaluate proposals coming in to ensure that we've got the answers and we've got a really clear, consistent, transparent approach in how we evaluate proposals going forward. But my comfort level would be have 1 or 2 councillors and 3 or 4 public members on it.
So I'm just going to leave this open for debate right now rather than motions or counter motions. So I saw Councillor Morales. I think I saw Councillor Riepma and Councillor Kungl. So I'm going to go with Councillor Morales, then go around the table.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I see your point. If this was the federal money that they got for themselves, like from their own budget, it would be that parliamentary committee chair and its standing members that would be accountable for how that money was spent. And sometimes, standing committees in Parliament are quiet, which is a polite word to say it. And when things don't go well or money gets spent, there's lots of questions and there's lots of panels and there's lots of sweaty answers. So I think why did I say that analogy is if there are questions on how the money got implemented, given to the community, and spent, the feds, when they're theoretically calling you, are going to be going to what they understand is the standing committee, and in that case, for us, that's the Community Safety Committee, the chair, its vice chair, and its membership. So I kind of understand why the similarities with these examples. So I'm actually I'm supportive of your approach to it and how it's typed. Here's another reason that makes me more comfortable, because I do see Councillor Hamilton's point. It doesn't mean that the other one isn't aligned with our strategic plan, but this one is very explicitly aligned with our strategic plan. It's a safer Barrie, and a lot of the initiatives, the community well-being plan, you name it. I could point to any document, and it would have to do with safety. So this one, the fact that it's much more materially aligned with the council's strategic plan, I think it being the members of the Community Safety Committee, for me, justifies it a little bit more. Whereas the other one, again, doesn't mean rec isn't important, because we also have a healthy city, et cetera, but recreation and sports community, it seems a little bit more micro. And I've had issues in the past before understanding micro and macro, but for this one, it can be a little bit more justified.
Just to confirm, because we did appoint a different committee tonight that has similar verbiage. You're saying the staff recommendation is what you agree with?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Just because of I thought I heard the other committee name, and Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. And I hear what you say, that we missed out last time, we didn't do it right. And we didn't have the right criteria in place, I suppose, and the wrong people got the wrong dollars. And I think the problem is not who is making the decision, but the criteria that they used to make the decision. And so I think if it's members of the Community Safety Committee, I don't have a problem with that. But the problem the committee is going to have is when there's a flood of applications sitting in front of the committee, how do you choose? Because, first of all, we have to set a set of criteria. And then I think whatever committee we strike can manage how they choose who to give the money to. So it seems to me more important that we decide what the criteria are going to be, And then whether it's staff or council, or community members, I'm not sure it matters. But I think it's really important to set the criteria, because otherwise, whatever committee you have is going to have the same problem that they had last time.
I'll just fill in some of the conversations that were had between the CAO and myself. One of the lines he stole from one of our provincial ministers was, "It's never been so hard to give out money." And the criteria are negotiated between us and the federal government. We align underneath the program. The issue that I see is we never applied for our program we're managing because we're managing the program. And if someone has any idea in the community of a better organization to manage this than us, in terms of managing dollars being spent versus the actual program itself, I'd be hard pressed to find it. So we do have to adhere to that federal policy on what the criteria are. They have been morphing and changing. So we don't really get to necessarily set it. But I think there was 16 applications or something like that, 17 applications. And there were 9 or 10 victors, 11 victors on the 700K. And, the business case that I very roughly outlined from our own department here blew any of those out of the water when I looked at it. But I'm totally open to it being a citizen panel. And I don't think that, Mr. Bell should ask Miss McAlpine to give money to Mr. Bell from the federal government for our program that we're, you know what I mean? Like there is an inherent conflict no matter how we deal with it if we're in charge of it.
And maybe that conflict doesn't go away if it's members of council.
I don't necessarily disagree. I have a conflict already because I'm saying what I think that should happen with it. Mr. Prowse.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I just wanted to remind members of committee, the program's over, so there's only one more intake. So I know we've asked for additional direction on this based on some feedback we received. But there is no indication the federal government's going to renew or continue this program. So I imagine once we've distributed the approximately 400,000 left over, the program will wrap up. So perhaps that helps inform who should be on the committee.
Just a quick comment, and I hear the considerations. I'm all for more of a citizen-led on this, but I do really appreciate that, in the memo, we're talking about the amount of money, the remaining portion of the allocations utilized by city-led initiatives. And that's not because we competed, but also as we could utilize it and it was appropriate. And there's really great work being done through our public service. So I think it's important for us to have some protection from that. If we keep the structure as is, or if we move it to council, then I would at least say, you've got a new committee you just struck. It might not be within their decision-making, but maybe consultation, because I can't help but assume if that committee, I believe the mandate is to review the community safety and well-being plan, make recommendations, set direction. Ideally, the timing is aligned to saying, do some of the initiatives coming forward more than others align to the things we want to see changes on? So maybe they're not the panel, but they're consulted.
Okay, so I think that's so it's another idea thrown at us. We've got an adjudication from staff, an adjudication through the Community Safety Committee, and a request for input and consultation with the Community Safety and Well-Being. I've got the page afterwards. I'd be fine with that if everyone else is fine with that. It brings in the folks we talked about earlier on, the Simcoe Muskoka Family Connections, Child, Youth, and Family Services, the Police Department, the Simcoe County District School Board, the County of Simcoe, the Health Team. I'm on both, and Councillor Kungle, and then Safe Barrie. Yep.
And if I may add further context, I think it could add some protectionistic approach, but it's also not necessary for them to have decision-making. But you could also look at a blind type of level, which is not the who applied, but what's the change mechanism that's being proposed for funding, and then you can help to remove some bias. So if it's city-funded program or an external program, what you're really focusing on is not the who, but what's the purpose of how the dollars are going to be spent and the confidence in the utilization of it.
Yeah, I love that. So really what you're saying is managed by staff, screened before it gets to any of the committee, so that it is not there's no possibility of politics getting into it, because it's literally just focused on the end result. Madam Clerk, hardest job of the evening.
Okay, so as an amendment, Mayor Nuttall, I would suggest that the composition of the adjudication panel, I guess we're going back to the staff, so they're identified in paragraph 13, which is the general manager, director of, sorry.
I think it was, I think it was just consulted through
Sorry.
No.
My apologies.
There's 9 million conversations, it's not your fault.
Okay, so then I would just, and that I would just add a paragraph that prior to any funds being awarded, that the Community Safety Committee consult with the Community Safety Wellbeing Committee on their selections.
Do you want me to repeat that? You're good? Okay. Councillor Corser?
Just for clarification, so the process would go, somebody would apply, then it would go through staff in consultation with the Community and Safety Wellbeing Plan, and then it'll come forward to Community Safety Committee here to be voted on as a blind kind of thing that we don't know the association we're voting on. We're just voting on the concept? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. I think I might need a little clarification on what the motion is.
Okay, my apologies, it's late. I'm not probably being very clear. So what would be is the paragraph, what is being proposed, and jump in if I'm incorrect, is that the composition of the adjudication panel, so anybody that applies, their applications would go to the Community Safety Committee for consideration. Prior to any final decisions being made, so the Community Safety Committee would review the applications, make their selections, and then provide them to the Community Safety Wellbeing Committee for any input and consultation before the funds are awarded to whatever organizations are selected.
I'm not sure if I am comfortable with, I'm not sure if I would vote yes to that, because I think that maybe to the end process, but we still would be lobbied, and we still would have the impact of making the gatekeepers of what would go forward as the Community Safety Committee, which would be council members. So I'm not sure if that was the spirit of the motion that was being put forward, or I'm just misunderstanding it.
Yeah, I think the framework needs to be figured out, but if you're doing a blind process, an individual lobbies results in not being part of the process, because otherwise it's undermined said process, right? So I'm less concerned about lobbying, because then you just say, oh, no, these people are trying to get around what council's already deemed to happen, and left themselves on the outside. But if you have an issue with the process, I think what the clerk has said is staff basically manage going out to market requesting proposals and submissions. That comes in, the Community Safety Committee will look at and evaluate without names, just seeing results. You know, we send it over, probably with our input up front, to this other, the Wellbeing Plan Committee for feedback. And then it comes back, and if there's friction and they don't align, then that's at least a conversation that the Community Safety Committee can go, okay, we either didn't think of that or we did, and here's why that doesn't make sense. But throughout the whole thing, there's accountability to it.
Perfect. And of course, staff would be, the applications that come through staff, and that would be, they would, of course, make sure the criteria is met for each application. Yeah, okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, awesome. Yep. Councillor.
Sorry, I know it's late. The blind process you're saying, so we wouldn't actually know who it was that was applying, correct? But don't you think throughout the proposal, like proposals that I receive, it's written throughout the proposal, right? You'd have to go through in any indication that would, I think that's impossible, truthfully. I think that's, great optimistic thinking, but I think it'd be very, very hard to go through a proposal and create an anonymity to it. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's just, I don't know how you would do that.
You know, I can honestly tell you that when I look through that list from previous, and maybe reread it between now and next week, I'm not sure that you'd be able to tell who it is from the previous one. Like, in fact, I say that because I remember being surprised about who was putting it forward. Going, how does that fit? Now, I guess in the City of Barrie camps, maybe it does.
I don't want to complicate things.
Yeah.
I think we've complicated them enough. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't think that would be feasible and realistic for every single proposal, truthfully.
Yeah. I just want to remind everyone, this is a staff-initiated, hey, we don't like the critiques, so please find a process that fits for what council appreciates. And that's what it is. And I can understand why staff doesn't want to be in a position where they're awarding money and they get critiqued by us. It's never going to be perfect. Let's land as close as we can. Deputy Mayor.
I don't think the ocean's just boiled yet. Just a little bit. I think, no motion to extend. Just reading this, it's one more year. To simplify it, let's remove council and just go with the community safety and well-being plan for the final year. And if we're fortunate enough to receive federal grant funding based on this, then we look at the composition of the select committee from that point moving forward.
Is that an amendment to your own amendment, or is that a friendly?
I didn't move an amendment.
I think you
so
did.
So I amended the amendment. I said if anybody had an amendment. But I'm amending that one.
So you're amending the motion you put on the floor. Okay, so the amendment's on the floor for just the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Committee to provide the recommendations back to or decision-making back to staff. Councillor Corser.
Just to drag this out so much further, I just wanted to take the temperature as staff, and I know that they brought this forward with the support of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Oversight. I'm hoping that that will add some comfort to staff going through the process. So, and I was wondering if maybe staff had some thing that they might want to enlighten us or inform us that we might not be, we might be missing something here. Is there any feedback from Mr. Prowse?
I'll start off, and Mr. Bell can certainly add in, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser. I would just like to clarify, staff are not responding to a critique specifically or criticism. This is the job that we do. I think what we've learned through this process is between the criteria developed by the federal government, who really hold the purse strings, and the genuine attempt to try to deliver services broadly across our community, the elected officials are actually probably better positioned to understand those needs. Outside of this program itself, I can tell you over the last probably year, I've had more community groups or needs identified mostly by the mayor and his office, to be honest with you. And for whatever reason, those groups would not get to me and they would not get to staff. But because of elected officials' connection with the community, they both understand the need and have the connection. And I think that was a piece that we identified actually was missing. So if we rewound the clock and did this from day one, I have to be honest, staff's recommendation would be similar. It's not a response to anything except that we think we can do better, but we think that we all play a role. Staff are very good at evaluations. They're very good at building criteria. They're very good on the technical side. We're not as connected to the community in the same way as elected officials are. And we think that that is a layer that perhaps could be added to this process to improve it quite genuinely. In this case, it happens to be at the end of a 2-year grant period, the last tranche of money, which is not expected to be renewed. So I would just tell you honestly that it is not a response to criticism or anything like that. It is, I believe, staff's genuine belief that together we can actually do better. And it's not always perfect, but that is, I believe, staff's position. But certainly if Mr. Bell has something to add, I'd welcome it.
I think, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser's question, that there is also an element of the funding that, in fact, we have used for internal city programs, haven't published it as well. So in an example, you mentioned summer camps. While we weren't overtly offering free camps as an example, we did increase the funding through the grant for those members of the Rec Access program so they could use additional funding to support their children in camps should they wish to. And at the end of the summer, we'll evaluate that program to see how well the uptake was. But yeah, other than that, I think CAO Prowse has said everything that needs to be said.
In light of staff's input, I hate to drag this out further and hit the rewind button, but I think that with this new information, I'd like to revisit, if it's possible in process, or if we're allowed to revisit the motion where it would go through the Community Safety Committee as a kind of a filter with after some staff input.
You would like to revisit going back to that, not the community safety and well-being?
With the blind motion that was put forward. I will put that out to whoever wants to take it.
Before I put the friendly out, can we just identify what's currently on the floor?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, it was to basically change the words of Community Safety Committee to Safety Well-Being is what's on the floor right now. But I thought
yeah. So I'm not sure how this complicates it. Maybe it's not friendly. But I think when we were talking a bit about the three pieces, keep the community safety and well-being as kind of the sandwiched piece, because then you're not changing their mandate. You're not getting them into the muck of becoming more of a funding evaluator. They're just being consulted with the blind to say, 10 applications came in, this amount of money, this is a target audience, this is a change mechanism. How does it align to the direction you're recommending about where we need to go and focus on a refresh of the community safety and well-being plan? And then it still kicks up to the council committee for final decision, with that being a bit protectionistic to say, we've had filters going through this with discretion. So if it leans towards staff programming, that's what it is. If it doesn't, that's what it is. But overall, there should be alignment through that group to say whatever is funded should be facilitating the direction we want to go in for the community safety and well-being plan. So I don't know if that's where we're at.
So just to confirm, because I think all 10 of us have been on every side of this. Are we recommending then the Community Safety Committee, are you recommending the Community Safety Committee be the final adjudicator?
Which is the standing staff committee, not the community well-being committee that we just struck? Just to clarify, because I know we're talking about two very similarly worded
It's not a staff
committees.
committee, it's a committee of council.
Right, then I am,
Right.
yes.
Yes. And that they get feedback from the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee.
Yeah.
And that staff handle the outputs and inputs in terms of requests for proposal.
Yes.
Okay, that's where we were a few minutes ago. We're back there. This is,
Does anybody want to take my turn?
okay. Any other questions or comments? None. So that's what's on the floor as an amendment. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It carries. On the main motion, all those in favor? It carries. You didn't even get an option to speak again, so that's the way it goes. We're going to move past the reports, items for discussion, information items, inquiries. Are there any inquiries from members of General Committee this evening? Seeing none, on to announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Kungl.
I'll be quick, but just for those that were not watching the Affordability Committee meeting, that was a public presentation on a Ward 3 property, the Sperling area, that's surplus land. So that would have been a zoning conversation, so it'll come back to General Committee, but that did identify a direction for 30 stories. So for those watching that development, please make sure you make reference to Ward 3 developments on the City of Barrie website. Communities in Bloom has a meeting on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Act Transportation Sustainability next Thursday, 5:30 p.m. And then just two other comments. One, thank you to Mr. Friery. I had a porta potty on the move. It was interesting where that thing landed and repeat issues, but Dave Friery and his team have been on that, and I appreciate that. But also Callaway Court, for residents that were in the habit of not visiting that space, that footbridge has been completed. Thank you to staff for that. And there's been a service request just for a bit of a tidy up in that area, but that is open and accessible. So again, thank you to staff for completing that. I know you fast-tracked it a bit to be done this spring.
Thank you, Councillor. I once had a porta potty put on my front lawn, and it turned me into 2.5 washroom house. Any other announcements? Councillor Corser.
So I just wanted to thank everybody. I had my Ward 4 spring celebration at Sunnydale Park last weekend, and although Saturday rained out, which kind of throws a damper on things, but we revived it on Sunday, and it was a fantastic event. Thank all the amazing people who made this year's Ward 4 Spring Celebration awesome. And thank you for pivoting all your plans due to the rainy weather on Saturday and make it happen on Sunday. And I would like to thank Redwood Park Communities, Nature Barrie, the City of Barrie Transit. There was Jason Zimmerman and Mike McConnell, I believe it is, of transit staff, who were absolutely fantastic. And from their waste management, we had Chris O'Neill and Matthew Shannon. And I just like to say that they were there, but really the stars of the waste management was the red wiggler worms, which were a huge favorite with the kids for the composting. It was a lot of fun. Big fan of worms. It was good. And there was Firebird Community Cycle came out, first Barrie Foresters Scout Troop, and of course they did their, child-friendly axe throwing, which was fun. I thought that I forgot a first aid kit because I needed one for site, and I raced over, and of course I asked the scouts, and they said we have 3. so we're good. But we didn't need it, thankfully. And the incredible, talented folk musicians that we had there last year. We had a group this year again. And the Barrie Pipe and Drum Highland dancers were fantastic. They were practicing for a competition, so they put on quite a show for us. And I'd like to thank also the phenomenal Cassandra Rutherford for helping me organize, well, actually, she organized it, I nodded, for making the Magic Happen again this year. And it was a fantastic event. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Courser. Any other announcements around the table? Seeing none. The City of Barrie's pavement marking contractor will start the annual painting of road lane markings across Barrie beginning the week of May 27th and will run until October. For more information, visit barrie.ca/road maintenance. The month of June is known as National Indigenous History Month and People's Day. There will be a flag raising ceremony at City Hall the 3rd of June at 11 a.m. For more information, visit barrie.ca/National Indigenous History Month. The City of Barrie invites residents to provide their feedback on the master plans for transportation, water, and wastewater as the city continues to grow. For information, please visit buildingbarrie.ca. The City of Barrie Council meeting scheduled for June 5th has been rescheduled to the 4th of June, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. So that will be Tuesday next week instead of Wednesday. Circulation list, May 15th. Are there any items from May the 15th? Seeing none, May the 22nd. Are there any items from May the 22nd? Seeing none, May the 29th. Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nadal. I have a question for item A11, 240529. Question to Mr. Prowse. In second, it's about the chronic homelessness issue. On page 2, it talks about the individual released from Central North Correctional Center. And is there any update regarding the family reunification program? I know we had some individuals who were not happy with this program, but for the record, since we start this program, how many individuals have been reconnected with their family, loved one? Is there any update with that?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Negussi. Councillor Negussi, I actually apologize. You and I had a conversation about this, and I thought actually the data you wanted me to pull was the prisoner drop-off data. So if you'll accept my apology, I'll get you the data. Because we didn't do it directly, the Family Reunification Fund was done through the John Howard Society, and I'm gapping on the Elizabeth Fry Society. And as part of our funding agreement with them, they did provide us some specific details. So I apologize. I'll circulate that to council electronically. I don't have it in front of me. But if you'd like to talk about the North Correction shuttle drop-off, I'd be happy to tell you about how many reformed prisoners we have diverted and have not arrived in Barrie because of the program and the funding that council instituted a year ago. Would you like me to talk about that? Thank you, Councillor Negussi. I appreciate that opportunity. And as council is as well aware, as part of the broad tranche of funding you approved last year, to address chronic homelessness in the City of Barrie. One of the pilots that we started and then and have carried forward was taking over the drop-off of released prisoners from the correctional facility in Penetanguishene. And for the last not quite a year, starting in September of last year, originally we ran the new shuttle program through a contractor, as council is well aware, and then mid-program actually switched it in-house, and we were able to reduce the cost by about 40%. So not only have we achieved council's intention of making sure that those individuals have the best chance of getting back to their home communities and are not simply dropped off in the City of Barrie, as in fact was the protocol previous to that. So I can tell you, since September of last year, 252 individuals that would have arrived in the City of Barrie actually arrived at other destinations closer to their home communities. And that would not have happened if it was not for the investment that this council has put in to the shuttle program, which is continuing to run. So we do look forward to providing additional details to council on the benefits of that program. But that is a significant number of released prisoners, 252 individuals, which, if not for council's action, would have arrived in the City of Barrie looking for opportunity, and instead they have arrived much closer to home with a better chance for success, and certainly puts us on a path to success as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you. If I, May 29th, C4 240529, memorandum from the Barrie Public Library Chief Executive Officer dated May 10th concerning the library's KPIs be referred to an October 2024 Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting.
Okay, it's a referral motion. All those in favor? Carries. Any other items on the circ list? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
May 29th, A10 240529, confidential memorandum from the Executive of Development Services regarding deposition of land, water lot to be referred to Finance and Responsible Governance Committee for consideration.
Referral motion with regards to the item. All those in favor? Carries. Any other items on the circ list?
I'm done.
Are you sure? Are you leaving? I don't see any other items on the circ list, so we're going to move to adjournment. Thanks, everybody. 10:30 p.m.